tinfoil hat.
Oh, what the fuck are you guys even talking about?
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Revolution will be podcasted.
All right, guys, welcome to the Wise Wolf Gold and Silver Studios. You can go to samtripoli.gold, get into the precious metals game for as little as $50 a month, sent right to your house. It's just that simple. And very excited for today's topic. She is a whistleblower. She is a mathematical biologist. I mean, dude,
Yep.
That's the smartest person I've ever heard in my life. Please welcome Rebecca Culshaw Smith. How are you, brother? How are you? I was so happy I got your name right and I called you.
I'm doing
dude.
great. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to talk to you. These are some of my favorite topics. Before we get into it, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where our listeners can find you?
Okay, so where you can find me, the easiest place to find me is on Substack, and it is literally just RebeccaCulshawSmith.substack.com. The name of the Substack is The Real AIDS Epidemic, which is the same name as the book that I had published in March of 2023 by Skyhorse Publishing, which was actually a updated, expanded version of the first book that I wrote, which was called Science Sold Out, that came out in 2007. I don't know how much you want me to get into my professional background, so just let me know.
We're open-minded to it all.
So let's just start at the beginning. So I grew up in the age of AIDS. I was born in 1974, and I remember when news reports of the scary disease with, weird skin lesions and people ending up on, in the hospital on the brink of death, and their immune systems were just devastated and nobody knew what it was. And then they started talking about how it was probably a blood-borne pathogen. And my mother had a really traumatic miscarriage, after which she had to have a blood transfusion. So my father he was obsessed with AIDS. He was sure that she had somehow contracted AIDS. And so I remember this sort of stuck in my head from an early age. And, she didn't, obviously. She was perfectly fine. But I always thought it was a fascinating disease. I found it really interesting. I thought, how odd it is that it does not behave like other infectious diseases. There's some foreshadowing. So I had intended to study medicine, actually, in university. And I was all set to do that. And then this is going to sound so nerdy, but I fell in love with calculus. And
I love that.
Like,
I wish I could fall in love with calculus. I really do.
So I pivoted and I decided that I would do a degree in mathematics, which I'm, very grateful for. I like to joke that if you're going to get a PhD in a topic that you're not going to use, mathematics is a good one because it teaches you how to think.
That's very interesting to me. I don't want to derail too much, but I'm a weird guy. I love watching long math problems on YouTube. Like, I just love watching them solve it. I want to see if I can do it.
Like you're talking about like where they use like a whole
like
wall?
You'll see like X over 3 divided and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, what is X? And I'm like, how did we even get here? And it's just like, I don't know why. I love watching those videos on how
Do you have any clue what's happening? Like, do you know what's happening?
Well, I understand. It's like this is my kind of thing. Like, I've never used any of that in real life, so I'm just like, but I just find the process of solving it just really interesting to me. So I wish I had that love for it when I was young, because I would have gone deep into it. Not that I would be that great at it, but I do understand falling in love with math.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was interesting because I didn't particularly care for math in high school. I really loved chemistry and biology, and math was just sort of a necessary evil. And when I took calculus, it was like all of a sudden I understood how everything fit together. It's like, oh, now I know why we did this then, even though it seemed like was what's the point of it? So that was part of it. At any rate, so I did my undergraduate degree, and then I started a master's degree, and this is in Canada, mind you. I was at Dalhousie University. My advisor was Dr. Shigui Ruan, who is, weirdly enough, comes from Wuhan. He's now at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. At any rate, I started my master's. I was like, I'm going to do something with differential equations, which is sort of, I'd call it the logical endpoint of calculus. At any rate, so I was doing a little shift in the Math Learning Center where you tutor people, and I had opened up the notices of the American Mathematical Society, and there was an article about people doing mathematical modeling of the interaction of the immune system and HIV. Whoa. And I was like, this is for me. Because I love biology and chemistry. I love mathematics. So I found the only mathematical biologist in the department at the time. I showed him this. He did not work on HIV, and he actually hasn't since. And I said, I would you be interested in working with me on this? And he goes, oh, yes, absolutely. This is a hot topic. This is going to be great. So I did. So in Canada, the master's and the PhD are awarded separately. Here, I think how it goes is you get your master's on your way to the PhD, and some people just stop after the master's.
Yes, that's how it goes. You get the master, then you get the PhD.
Yeah, so in Canada, they're separate, and a lot of people do terminal master's degrees, and I kind of thought maybe that's what I would do. And after I did my master's, like my life was sort of a mess, and I ran away to England and bartended for a while, and then I came back and worked as an actuarial student, which was the most miserable experience I've ever had in my entire life working in insurance. And that made me realize I want to go back and do my PhD, and I want to work with the same guy, and I want to, expand on what I was doing in my master's, because I had gotten, a journal article out of it. So, it seemed promising. So I jumped back in working with the same guy, and I was approaching the project from a kind of a different perspective, because I'd taken a class in optimal control theory. None of this is going to mean anything to anybody. So to do my dissertation, obviously, so what I was doing was I was looking at this, a mathematical model that determines, what happens when you apply a treatment to an immune system. And by the immune system, we're talking about T cells. We'll get into all of that. And so it's not like a typical epidemic model where you would model what happens throughout the population, which we heard a lot about during COVID. This is actually applying those principles to what's going on inside the person's body. So, of course, I had to do a lot of research into the actual biology and what was going on, how this mysterious, very tiny, very fragile, according to the mainstream virus, managed to cause such incredible decimation. And at the time, and this has changed, which is something that we need to talk about as well, but at the time, HIV was considered to be, or HIV disease, they call it, was considered to be primarily the destruction of all of the body's helper T cells. And the helper T cells, basically, they're T cells, they're white blood cells, and they send a signal to other cells in the immune system to, make antibodies or attack a foreign host, natural killer cells or something like that. And so this idea was you start out, and you have it turns out that there's a huge confidence interval for the number of helper T cells that any healthy person has. But they said back in the day that you would typically start out with 1,000. And if you contracted HIV and HIV killed all these T cells, you would somehow get down to like below 200 or 0 T cells. And therefore your body would be susceptible to all sorts of opportunistic infections, and you would die and there'd be nothing to do about it. But here's the thing that I found out. There was no accepted, agreed upon model as to how HIV actually killed those T cells. They didn't observe it in the lab. They didn't observe it in people. They just saw that these T cells were gone, and they assumed that HIV was killing them. There's a great quote, and I want to say this was from probably 15 to 20 years ago, and I don't remember who said it, but it was an HIV researcher, and he said, well, we're still very confused as to how HIV kills these T cells, but now we're confused at a higher level of understanding.
That's great.
We don't know, but we know we don't know.
That's funny. We don't know
Exactly.
better.
We don't know better. Our unknowing is much better than our old unknowing.
It's like Donald That's a Rumsfeld quote.
Yeah,
the known knowns and the unknown unknowns. And remember that shit?
Well,
dude?
here's a little tidbit that a lot of people probably don't know. when the first patients in San Francisco, I think it was like the first 5 AIDS patients that were Michael Gottlieb's patients in San Francisco, the technology for counting T cells had only just been developed. And so he decided, oh, hey, let's look for some T cells in these people. So if some other technology might have been developed, who knows what they would have been looking for? And like put a pin in that, because it turns out that they don't even really use T cells to track disease progression anymore. So we'll circle back to that later. But just back to my story, and I'm almost done.
No, it's all good. I'm enthralled. I'm loving it.
Okay, so I went to my advisor when I was starting to have doubts, and I had also found this mathematical criticism of the 1995 Ho and Wei papers that were in Nature. And what those papers were the papers that justified hit hard, hit early antiretroviral treatment and ushered in the whole protease inhibitors, which are now not even prescribed anymore because they're so toxic. So anyway, I had come across this article, and this guy completely debunked their mathematical model, and it's bad. And this David Ho was named Times Man of the Year in 1996 for his new understanding of the immune system that isn't even accepted anymore. At any rate, I went to my advisor. I showed him the paper. I said, I don't know if I can work on this anymore. And he said, look, you're almost finished. You've got all your coursework done. You just need to stick it out, finish your dissertation. You're doing a mathematics dissertation. You're not discovering anything new in medicine or anything. Just focus on the mathematics. Once you get your degree, then you can maybe shift focus. And, I'm thinking, okay, I guess I'll do that. I wasn't completely convinced that HIV was bunk at that time, but I was suspicious. And at any rate, finished the degree, got a job at a teaching college in Iowa, Clark College, which is now Clark University. And I was on a 2-year replacement for a guy that went to do mission work in American Samoa. So I was just kind of working on wrapping up my stuff from my dissertation and getting some papers published. And then I got a tenure track job at a university in Texas in 2004. And I moved here, and I was trying to work on this stuff and see if I could maybe spin it in a different direction and do some interesting mathematics. And I just was so frustrated. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. I don't even believe in this theory. I think it's actively harming people. I quit. And so in the middle of the night, very, how you get sometimes you're just so full of energy. Yeah. I wrote this little essay called Why I Quit HIV, and I sent it to my friend Darren Brown, who is also a mathematician. He lives in California. He used to be very involved in this sort of alternative AIDS world, but he's kind of not doing that anymore. But I sent it to him, and he said, we need to send this to Harvey B. Alley. And Harvey B. Alley, he passed away, I think, in 2019. He was the scientific biographer of Peter Duesberg, and Peter Duesberg is kind of like the big daddy of people who questioned HIV causing AIDS, because he stuck his neck out way back in the 80s and basically paid for it with his career.
Was he the gentleman who stuck blood in himself? There was a gentleman.
No, I know who you're talking about, and I forget his name. Peter Duesberg said he would have no problem injecting himself with HIV as long as there wasn't any other funky stuff in the blood. So, but he never actually injected himself with anything.
Okay. This is a really amazing conversation, and it's like we have some of these episodes where it's just like, I think 99% of the population just couldn't. The people listen to this will love it, and you're crushing it. It's just like I have so many people in my life that I tell them about. I'm going to send this episode to 2 of my friends. I've gotten in, not heated, but little debates on HIV, because everything you're saying is so amazing. So I just want you to know that.
Thank you. And honestly, I truly think that questioning HIV is the third rail for so many people. And that became very clear to me during COVID, when all sorts of people were questioning vaccines. They were questioning the existence of COVID, and yet they're still all, on board with HIV. Alex Berenson is a very good example of that. He did a really good job questioning lockdowns and vaccines, but if you ever mention HIV, he's like, oh no, this is like the one shining example of the time they got it right. Anyway.
It's so crazy to me, because you get into archaeology, and like there's the old school, and then there's kind of these new people coming up, and they make discoveries that change timelines, and the old school will not recognize those because it basically debunks everything they believe forever. So it's like there's some, and you know, I watch a lot of virologists talk about the isolation of HIV, and we'll get into all that with you, but it's unbelievable to me when you know something for a fact. It's like what we talk about ChatGPT. You know, you want to see how good ChatGPT is, ask them a question you know the answer to, and you'd be amazed how many times it gets it wrong, and it just spews propaganda to you because it's programmed to do that. That's kind of this whole thing. You know it's right. I'm listening to you. It's like I obviously I don't think like you do. I'm not a mathematical biologist, but I just everything you're saying just really resonates with me, and I just wish people would understand it. You know, again, I was talking about this before. I have a cousin who's going to have a baby, and her and the mother and myself, I want to talk to them about not hitting this kid with these vaccines until it's at a certain age. I wouldn't hit them at all, but you know, if you're going to, wait till their bodies have, and like they can't understand that, and they'll take some lab coat person that they don't even know who they are, or they see somebody on television and they'll just take whatever they say, while their own flesh and blood that loves them to pieces.
That has a show about this. That does a little bit of research.
Just hold off. Trust me on this. It's this whole thing with this programming is so strong that it overrides instincts. It's so crazy to me. So I'm sorry to cut you off, but go on.
Oh, you're good. You're good. No, that reminded me, actually, just a few weeks ago, I took my 16-year-old to get a checkup to go to summer camp, and they immediately said, okay, time for an HPV vaccine. And I said, yeah, we're not going to take that. Thanks, though.
Yeah, anyway. We don't need it. Nope. No, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just about to wrap up.
Take your time.
Dramatic origin story.
So, I love it.
Okay. So I send the piece to Lou Rockwell. He publishes it on his his website or whatever. Next morning, I get into work and I open up my email, and there are literally thousands of emails.
Whoa.
And most of them were critical, but some of them were very supportive. And so anyway, that led to my getting a book contract with North Atlantic Books. They asked me to publish a polemic on the problems of the HIV theory of AIDS. And that book was Science Sold Out, which I have here. Science Sold Out, Does HIV Really Cause AIDS? And so that came out in 2007. And, I'm just, innocently going along, doing my job as an assistant professor. And I was also pregnant at the time with my first child. And the internet was starting to talk about me, right? And there was a coordinated letter writing campaign, somewhere between 12 and 20 letters from various doctors and professors around the country were sent to the president of my university, basically saying what a dangerous crackpot they have working for them, and they need to do something about it. And the president, he would send the letters to me, and then he forwarded them to the dean. And the dean was, at the time, was an interim dean who was very, very ambitious. And sometime in the spring, I was heavily, heavily pregnant. I remember that because I was so distracted. And she asked me to come to her office, and I knew that I was getting the boot, like just the way that she said it. And so I went up to her office, and she's like, well, some of the students aren't happy with you, and blah, 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 blah. And your research has fallen off since you've been here. And I'm going to, we'll give you a year's contract, and then basically you're out of here. And I don't know. I can't say if my, work on HIV and my very public defection from the mainstream had anything to do with it. If you're untenured, they can fire you at any time for any reason, and they don't have to give you the reason. So kind of another reason altogether. She fired some other people that year for also spurious reasons. There was a fellow who had been hired in the biology department to be their research professor, and they were the other biologists were so resentful of him that they slapped him with the pre-med pre-dental committee, so he had no time to do research. I mean, it was just kind of a scummy sort of a situation. So that was that. I was like, all right then, not sure what I'm going to do here. I couldn't really look for another job because my husband had custody of his 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and part of the divorce agreement was that we couldn't leave the county until the girls were 18. So I decided, okay, well, I guess I'm going to pivot, have my baby, maybe have another couple of kids. I guess I've said my piece, and maybe I'll get back into mathematics at a later date. Right now, I'm concentrate on my young family. And I thought at the time, it's probably never going to come up again. I don't think, like I said, I've said my piece. My conscience is clean. I'm happy that I left the field. If I had to pay for it with my job, at least I had, a husband and a family to fall back on. It's not like I was destitute. And so, like I said, I thought it was done. And then COVID happened.
Oh, wow.
And all I could think was, I remember the very beginning when they were first starting to lock down. I remember sitting with my husband outside having an argument with him. And I was explaining how, like, from a mathematical biology perspective, lockdowns only work if you start them before the disease even gets out the gate. So they're ridiculous anyways. And I just
now, is your husband open-minded to your thoughts?
No, he absolutely is. About HIV, actually, he's also a mathematician. And I remember, when we first started dating, he assumed that I was, on the orthodox side of the HIV/AIDS debate, and he was kind of blown away when I told him what I had come to understand to be true. And he said, the demographics of that disease never made sense to me. Like, your explanation makes much more sense than the mainstream explanation. So he's very open-minded about that. But I don't know if he was scared of COVID or he was so delighted. He's such an introvert. I think he was just delighted.
Oh, yeah. My mom was like that. I don't have to leave my house.
Yes!
I can't leave. I'm going to stay home. I don't need to see anybody ever. And if you look at from like the 1920s and all the things they said on how to, if you're not feeling good, what to do, it was the exact opposite of what they told you during COVID. They were like, in the 20s, they were like, go outside, work out, get in the sun, do all this stuff. And then you saw during COVID, it was the exact opposite.
Yeah, stay in your home so that all of these, whatever, if you believe in these pathogens circulating around, let's just trap them in the home with the people. Great idea. Anyway, so COVID happened, and I decided to start a Substack because I wanted to talk about things like positive predictive value of tests and talk about, the PCR technology, because I, know a fair bit about that because it's heavily employed in AIDS. I mean, that's how they calculate the viral load is by PCR. So the number
God.
Oh yeah. The number, it's hilarious because undetectable, it used to be considered to be less than 10,000 copies per milliliter, and now they've dropped it to under 20. And it's just so funny because you'd see these diagrams. It's like, don't worry about a viral blip. It's like, okay, so undetectable is actually detectable. It's crazy.
Very interesting to me too, because I have this theory based on doing this show for so long that the reason Carrie Mullins got the Nobel Peace Prize for inventing that machine, because he basically helped them figure out a way that they could kind of astroturf something's there. So,
Yeah, the idea is to take fragments of the genome of whatever it is that it's been, employed fairly extensively in crime scene analysis. But the idea is you take these fragments and you exponentially multiply them so that you can see what's there and you have enough to work with. And so you can clearly see how using that as viral load to tell an AIDS patient how much virus they have floating around in their bodies, it doesn't even measure whole viruses. And like I said, even the mainstream, there was a good paper by Potty et al. That said that PCR, the viral load test, overestimates infectious virus by a factor of 60,000. And that the vast majority of these viruses that they're measuring are defective and therefore are not able to cause disease, which raises the question, if you are doing research based on these defective virions or parts of the virus, how are any of your conclusions even valid? Because you're talking about something that's defective, right? You need to be working with the whole genome of something that is infectious and can repeat. You can isolate that pathogen.
Koch's postulates, right?
That's Koch's postulates.
Koch's postulates. And then there's another one called Rivers Requirements or something like that. It's another one that they came up with later because They couldn't do
Yes,
Cox
I know what you're
postulates
talking
or
about.
Koch's postulates. They couldn't do that. Guys, real quick, I'm telling you about our good friends, Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. You know, in these crazy times, the most stable way to make your money and get into money is precious metals. So let me tell you about Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. If you're paying attention, you know that de-dollarization is real. Fiat is fake, and you don't want to be left holding the bag when the dollar collapses. Gold and silver have been money through all of recorded history and are an excellent way to protect yourself from inflation and geopolitical turmoil. That's why I trust my friends at Wise Wolf Gold and Silver for all precious metals, all things precious metals. I love it. I am part of the Wolf Pack. Every month I have precious metals sent right to my house, and I love it. See, Wise Wolf Gold and Silver is veteran owned and A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau. No transaction is too big or too small. You can even roll over your 401k or IRA into physical gold and silver. And if you think you can't afford precious metals, think again. With the Wolfpack monthly membership program, you can get gold and silver delivered directly to your door for as little as $50 a month. As little as $50 a month. You can have precious metals. You start loading it up, man. By the end of the year, you'll have a good chunk of precious metals. Dude, it's crazy. Just go to samtripoli.gold. You can see all the different plans they have. Man, it's like $50. Lone Wolf, Warrior Wolf, $125. Alpha Wolf is $250. And it just keeps going up. Sent to your house. Right there. It's that simple. It's that simple. Easy peasy. Get in, get out, get your gold, get your silver. I love it. I'm doing it. Dude, I'm telling you, all of these affiliates I use, and I use Wise Wolf Gold and Silver. I use it all the time. It's real simple. So if you want to get in, this is how you do it. Wise Wolf Gold and Silver also deals in and accepts Bitcoin. So here's what I need you to do, okay? Go to samtripoli.gold, promo code tinfoil at checkout to receive free constitutional silver. That's right. And remember, in a world of bulls and bears, be the wolf. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about my good friend Christian Yordanov, okay, and his livelongerformula.com. Guys, I can't recommend this enough. If you get a second, go check out his website, and let me tell you a little bit why you should, okay? Let me tell you about livelongerformula.com. Listen, are you struggling with digestive problems, low energy, you can't sleep, brain fog, or hormone issues like low sex drive, anxiety, and weight gain? Yes, yes, and yes. Okay, that's why I want to tell you about. You need to go to livelongerformula.com and book a free session with my friend, Christian Yordanov, okay? Christian is a longevity author and functional health practitioner, and he will help you get your gut working smoothly, detox yourself, boost your testosterone, and sleep like a baby and function at your best, because you deserve to be your best and thrive and not just survive the apocalypse, okay? It's really that simple. Go to livelongerformula.com/Sam, where you will watch where you can watch his latest masterclass on the 7 deadly health fads that shorten your life. After watching this masterclass, if his approach resonates with you, you can book a free metabolic function assessment with Christian so he can help you identify the root cause of your health problems. Make sure to mention my name, Sam, okay? Sam, okay? When you book your session, and you'll get a free gift if you decide to work with him to optimize your health and longevity. Go to livelongerformula.com/Sam and take control of your health now. Okay, that's go to livelongerformula.com and take control of your health right now. Let's go. Real quick, guys, if you go to samtripoli.com, go to events, you can find my dates. Going to be at Bohemian Grove this weekend. Then I'm going to be in San Diego. Then I have Boston, Connecticut coming up. You name it, it's all there. I don't want to go too deep in. Just hit the date real quick. I'll just do those dates real quick. Just go to samtripoli.com and check. And Broadbrook, Connecticut. Make sure you go. We're going to that one. So, that's it. I've had Dr. Andrew Kaufman on the show, I think twice.
Oh yeah, I know who he is.
I'm a big fan of his and his thoughts, and he'll often go through a lot of the COVID papers, which have said they isolated the virus, and then he'll go to the things that people like you look at, but people like us may not take time to look at, the footnotes and the sightings of the research, and then he'll go to the actual papers, read the papers, and within the papers, they will say this doesn't actually satisfy Koch's postulates. So I find it very interesting for sure, all that stuff. But going back to what you were talking about, the PCR test.
Oh yeah. So anyway, no, that's all I had to say was that even the mainstream claims that it overestimates infectious virus by a factor of 60,000. But it's ridiculous that they use it in the first place. And what's really disturbing is that I'm sure you've heard the term U equals U, which is
You'd be surprised.
Equals untransmittable. And
U
so
equals
the idea,
hold on. Sorry about that. I made a bad joke. I'm not the smartest person in the world.
No, you're fine.
So U equals U is what?
Okay, U equals U is undetectable equals untransmittable. And so the idea behind that is that if HIV positive patient is virally suppressed so that they have an undetectable viral load, then they can't pass it on sexually or by any other way. And so this has legal consequences, of course. So, in places, I think it varies from state to state, but like in your state, California, for example, if you're undetectable, you don't have to disclose your status to your partners. The disturbing.
Quick question. So undetectable means if you're on PrEP. So if you're taking
that means no. When they test.
PrEP, okay, so PrEP is for people who are HIV negative, and that's a whole different problem. So this is for people who've tested positive, who supposedly have HIV in their body. They can't get rid of it. But if they're on treatment and they go to get their labs done and the viral load comes up undetectable or less than 20 copies per milliliter, they're considered to be unable to transmit in any circumstances. However, if you actually look at the medical literature, HIV is not a sexually transmitted pathogen. It's definitely not bidirectionally sexually transmitted. Women basically cannot transmit it to men, or whatever signal is being transmitted by HIV positivity. It's not. And the Perth group has argued this extensively as well, that HIV is not a bidirectionally sexually transmitted disease, and it does not actually behave like an infectious disease at all. But that's a whole nother topic.
Okay. All right. So where do we want to get back to? We keep knocking it off with our questions. Where are we at?
Okay. Well, I guess there's so much that
we're
can talk
here
about
for it
on this topic. Well, speaking of the demographics, for example, this is actually really interesting, and I give a lot of credit to Dr. Henry Bauer. He is the Emeritus Dean of Arts and Sciences at Virginia Tech. He's a retired chemist. He actually has a Substack. He's in his 90s now, but he wrote a book around the same time as my first one came out in 2007. Oh, I never actually finished my story about my book, but anyway.
Whatever you want to talk about, I'm enthralled.
Okay. So let's just talk about the demographics, and then I'll wrap my story up. What he did was he looked at the CDC's own data, starting from the beginning of the epidemic up until 2007, and he found that not only had HIV positivity remained at 0.3% of the population since testing began, and it was dispersed all throughout the country. And the theory at the time was that the virus had entered through LA, New York, and San Francisco. But they started screening Army recruits. And there was this huge study by Colonel Burke that came out in the early 90s, where they studied hundreds and thousands of Army recruits. And there were some odd signals about HIV positivity in the results. And what they found was that actually in the teen years, girls, the younger teen years, girls test HIV positive more frequently than do males. And then after that, it flips. and it's about 2-to-1, which is interesting because the AIDS ratio is more like 9-to-1 men to female. Like 90% of AIDS patients even now are men. So anyways, so then he started looking into the demographics even further and discovered, okay, first of all, it's been 0.3% of the population for 40 years. That is not how a new infection behaves. So there's a couple of options. Either one, which is what I think is the case, we're not measuring an infectious pathogen at all. The signal is signaling something else. Or two, the virus entered the United States much, much, much earlier than we thought, which causes, again, a conundrum because then why didn't AIDS show up until the 80s? So there's a problem right there, but that's only the beginning of the problems with the demographics. Another thing that's really interesting is that HIV positivity is never zero in any risk group, including groups that should be at no risk, like repeat blood donors. And this has been shown in other countries as well. And also in every single risk group, the racial disparities of HIV are African Americans test positive 5 to 6 times more frequently than do whites. Okay, this gets more interesting. And then you have Hispanics in between there. And then you have whites and you have Asians testing positive. And it's that way in every risk group. But the Hispanic thing is really interesting because on the West Coast, Hispanics tend to test positive about the same as do whites. And on the East Coast, it's closer than to how often Black people test HIV positive. And the reason for this is because Hispanic is an ethnic category. And in the West, most Hispanics are from Mexico, whereas in the East, they come more from the Caribbean and have more African ancestry. And so Dr. Bauer's thesis is there's something about being African American that is inherent. It's not a disease process, but it makes you much more likely to test positive. And we've certainly, I mean, if you see any of the advertisements for PrEP or HIV drugs, you know, it's very clearly targeting a specific racial demographic.
Yes, you're totally right. I mean, SportsCenter cannot stop running HIV commercials. It's unbelievable to me that a sports show is constantly running HIV commercials.
In a weird way, would you say then it's kind of like, I mean, it might sound weird, but like diabetes for Mexicans, how Mexicans are more prone to diabetes for whatever reason. Would you say it's something like that? Or why would you say that African Americans get it more?
Yeah, or something like sickle cell anemia, which is but it becomes complicated because there's so many tests to test for this. First of all, you have 2 different types of antibody tests, and then so that's usually the first line of testing. But the thing is that there's something like 70 cross-reacting conditions that can create antibodies that'll cross-react on the HIV tests. And it gets even crazier too, because the initial test that they do, which is called an ELISA test, and that basically just gives you a yes/no answer, kind of like a pregnancy test or something like that. And it turns out that the ELISA test has to be run on blood that is diluted 400 times. And there was a doctor in New York City, and he also died during COVID. We lost a lot of people from the AIDS critical community during COVID. At any rate, his name was Roberto Geraldo, and he ran an experiment where he collected blood from 100 of his colleagues and students at the hospital, and then he ran the HIV test undiluted, and they all tested negative. And then he ran it undiluted, and every single one came back positive. And there's also some, I don't know why. So, and there are other laboratory tests that you have to dilute a little bit to kind of filter out any sort of false positive. But I think the most that you ever dilute anything is like 10 times or something. And I think that's for Epstein-Barr. Don't quote me on that. So that's a weird thing that mainstream has never really thoroughly satisfactorily addressed. But regardless, that's usually the first line. If you're being screened for HIV, they'll give you an ELISA test. And then if that's positive, they'll give you another one. If that's positive, again, they used to give you something called a Western blot where the proteins were separated. I don't believe that test is used anymore. And that test was crazy because in order to be positive, the criteria were different in different countries. And there was this whole joke that I think you had to have 3 out of 10 bands ping in the United States. And in Australia, you only had to have or you had to have 4 or something like that. And so the joke was you could be HIV positive in America and fly to Australia and you magically be negative.
Whoa.
That's crazy.
That's probably
crazy.
why they don't use that test anymore. And then we get into PCR testing, okay? And so one of the big problems, and Peter Duesberg, as I mentioned, he's a molecular biologist. He's in California. He at Berkeley, and he was quite a star in the 1970s and early 1980s because he had done something with a cancer gene. I'm not a cancer specialist, so that's as far as I can explain it to you. But what he ended up doing was realizing, oh, actually, I did not actually isolate a cancer gene, and he basically torched his own work, which is, a very brave thing of a scientist to do. And with time, he was proven right.
Wow.
So he was a retrovirologist, and here's something that your audience might not know is that a lot of these people that worked on HIV, and Kerry Mullis writes about this in his book. Kerry Mullis himself, having invented the PCR technique, he actually wrote the foreword to Duesberg's big book, Inventing the AIDS Virus, and he was a very strong critic of the HIV/AIDS theory. At any rate, the PCR technology that he invented that in the 80s, but it didn't start getting widely used until the 90s. And he had Kerry Mullis himself had a couple of great lines. One of them was, you can't use PCR for diagnosis. And then he also said quantitative PCR is an oxymoron, and quantitative PCR is exactly what they do when they give an HIV positive patient their viral load. And so when Duesberg started criticizing the theory, one of his strongest critiques was that healthy or sick, it was almost impossible to find actual HIV and AIDS patients. Like, you could find antibodies, you could find fragments of genetic material that could be related to a retrovirus, and that's probably where you're getting your PCR viral load from. But this was a huge problem for the orthodoxy. And if we get into, the original papers that started this whole thing, I can kind of identify the original sin that sent us down this path that we really need to turn that ship around. And at any rate, so what happened was they started using viral
real
load.
quick, sorry. I'm so sorry to cut you off because you're cooking with gas. I've been reading a lot about reading and watching YouTube videos about retroviruses, and there's something very specific about retroviruses. And now, is it a retrovirus is something that enters the cell? Is that what a retrovirus is? Because that's very important to this discussion.
Okay, so a retrovirus is it's an RNA virus, so it has RNA instead of DNA, and it uses an enzyme called reverse transcriptase to copy the RNA into DNA, and then it integrates itself into the genome of the host cell.
Yes, that's it. That's very important to this, I believe.
Well, it is important, and another thing that's important is that the human genome itself is composed of, I think, 3 to 8% of endogenous retroviral fragments. And when these get released, if your body is under stress, they get released as extracellular vesicles or human endogenous retroviruses, and your body can actually mount an immune response to itself. And I think
Are you talking toxins? Is that along the lines of what we're talking about?
Toxins or any sort of trigger, to be honest with you, any sort of trigger. It just depends on the person, but toxins would be something. Cancers, for another, can cause these. Andrew Kaufman should know about this because I know he's discussed extracellular vesicles before. But anyways, yes, HIV is alleged to be a retrovirus, and it's alleged to enter and integrate itself into the genome of the host cell, and so you can never get rid of it. But at any rate, back in the 80s and the early 90s, they would look at AIDS patients and they couldn't find any, actual HIV. And still, to this day, there have been no two identical copies of HIV isolated, even from the same AIDS patients, which is why it is referred to by the mainstream as a quasi-species. Okay? Which is it's a bit of a conundrum when you think about AIDS in Africa, and this is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's important. Okay, so remember this: according to the mainstream, even HIV is considered to be a quasi-species. It's so highly variable it can't even be defined as a unique thing. In mathematics, if something's not unique, you can't say it. You can't claim that it exists. But regardless,
when you mean sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Sorry.
When you say,
oh, no, you're fine.
If it can't be proven to be unique, or if it's not unique.
So what we would in mathematics, we have, existence and uniqueness. And so if you want to define something, that you want to show that something is an independent entity, first you have to show that it exists, and then you have to show that it's unique.
Okay.
So this is, I'm being a little bit nerdy, and this is not
no, but
anyway.
I think it's important. When something is unique, what does that mean?
Well, then you can, for example, with HIV, you would want to show that you can, if you have somebody who has this infection, you should be able to isolate the virus, and you should have it on a density gradient, and every single particle should be identical, right?
Oh.
You're not having different, and they've never done this, by the way. Another person that we lost tragically during COVID, Dr. Etienne de Harvin, he's an electron microscopist who actually did isolate the first retrovirus, the Friend leukemia virus, with Charlotte Friend, and he was a very critical of the HIV/AIDS theory. He wrote a book called 10 Lies About AIDS, and he was, very determined to let people know that what they think of as isolation of HIV is no such thing. They're trying to, what they refer to as isolation is, it's usually something like detecting reverse transcriptase, which is not unique to HIV. It's in umbilical cords, which is probably part of the reason that pregnant women are at higher risk of testing positive, false positive. I mean, I think all positives are false positives on the HIV, but that's regardless. At any rate, they started using, so this was a big problem for the HIV people, is they couldn't find any HIV. It's like, well, how can it be making people sick if you can't even find it? Well, then they started using PCR to multiply these little fragments, and all of a sudden they got a number like, oh, Duisberg has to eat crow. We found all of this HIV. I mean, but it was ridiculous because they're just multiplying, they're just amplifying these fragments of, just a small snippet of the 9,000 or whatever nucleotides are claimed to be in this particular pathogen. And so David Ho and his colleagues made a big splash in '95 in Nature, where they looked at PCR, and this is where he came up with this famous tap and drain analogy as to what happens with HIV. He said, contrary to what we believed before, HIV is actually very active from the beginning of infection. It's constantly producing new viruses. The problem is the body's getting rid of them faster than it can be produced. And so the analogy that he used was the drain was bigger than the tap. And eventually, after years and years of immune activation, all the T cells in the body would be gone. But there were some problems with this paper. And this is the guy that got Times Man of the Year in '96 for these papers. There are some serious problems with these papers, not only mathematically, but biologically. The biology, I can't speak to as much as I can the mathematics, but I'm just going to tell you what they did, and I'll try to explain it in as simple terms as I possibly can. I actually did a whole live stream on Substack about this.
Yeah.
So what they did was they created a mathematical model of HIV and the immune system. So they had an equation for the change of virus over time, and they had an equation for the change in T cells over time. However, first of all, they were basically the same equation, and they basically were it was an equation that had an exponential function. Depending on what you put into it or what you put out of it, either the virus would grow or decay, and the T cells would grow or decay. But the equation for the change in T cells over time didn't even have a term for HIV in it. Like, they were it was the most sophomoric, amateur mathematical model, and models can't prove anything, by the way. All they can do is, you put something into a mathematical model, it's going to spit out an answer based on what you put in. That's where we get garbage in, garbage out. And a good example of that was those Neil Ferguson models at the beginning of COVID, where he was predicting, 2 million deaths in the US and stuff like that. Yeah. And he said, but if we do social distancing, it'll be this. Well, those models didn't prove social distancing worked. Those models assumed it worked, and they input it as a variable. And so all they can do is quantify things. So people get all, excited about these fancy mathematical models. And I always like to remind people, They can't prove anything. They are just reflecting your assumptions. They can be very useful, but you cannot use a mathematical model to prove anything.
So crazy that they could take like disease and put a mathematical equation to it. That is
yeah, there are people who do this with cancer and tuberculosis and all sorts of things. It's actually a really hot field in mathematics right now.
That is incredible. You know, I don't want to get too much awesome stuff at the end. So basically, I personally believe that if you push a narrative that allows the establishment to basically push that narrative to the masses, which helps them in whatever they're trying to do. I think sometimes it's pharmaceuticals, selling more pharmaceuticals. I think there's also a lot darker motives at the highest levels. I personally think we're dealing with sorcerers and what they want. I don't know where that fits into mathematics, but you know that there's this kind of like dark energy at the very top of all of this. So if you push out an equation or a finding that doesn't necessarily have to even be correct, right? They'll push it out. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about our good friends at Ridge Wallet. Listen, if you're like me, you tended to want to have a very old wallet. Look at that. That is offensive, okay? But no, now I don't have to have that because I have this now. That's right, the Ridge Wallet. It is slick, compact, and perfect for the modern man, all right? What do you guys think of your Ridge Wallet?
It's amazing. My back stopped hurting. It's that simple.
It's great.
Yeah, you can't sit behind, what do you call that? A TV that you sit behind?
Look at this. In this thing, you could have your credit cards, your driver's license, your green card, your papers, you name it. It can fit right into that. Okay, it's just that simple. Johnny, do you love your Ridge Wallet?
I adore it. Yes, it fits the aesthetic, especially is what I like. It fits the clean lines that I like. You know, the simplicity of it.
It's just unique. Wonderful. It's like, look how slim it is. It's super modern, easy to stick in your pocket. You don't have to have this giant whatever that was.
Dude, look at that. They got America one on there.
Dude, you have an American Ridge Wallet for Americans, okay?
You can get US Navy. They got options.
Take a guess how many cards you can have in this Ridge Wallet. I'm going to tell you 12. 12! I don't even have enough cards. I got to go out and get new credit cards just to fill this thing up.
Nice.
That's how nice that is. Thank you, Ridge Wallet. Okay, has over 50 colors, styles to choose from. It's unbelievable. Look at that. Whatever. Look at that.
Cool. That's cool. That test card. That's cool.
Oh my God. I'm gonna get another one. I got one. I'm gonna get more. Look at that, dude.
I got the carbon fiber one. It looks
Ooh, look at that, Johnny. You're cool, dude. And it's got one of the things you need right now. RFID blocking technology, Johnny. Keep you safe from digital pickpocketers. Those scumbags are out there. Over 100,000 5-star reviews. You gotta be kidding me, okay? It's just that simple.
They got a 10K gold one? Sam.
Dude, give me that gold. I'm all about it, dude. Losing your wallet is the worst. Guess what? With Ridge Wallet AirTag attachments, you always know exactly where it is. Okay. All right, and they're not just about wallets either, dude. They got suitcases, they got key cases, they got rings, all built the same slick, durable design. And no matter what you pick, Ridge Wallet has free shipping and a 99-day risk-free trial and a lifetime warranty on all their products. For a limited time, our listeners get 10% off a Ridge Wallet by using the promo code TINFOIL, okay? That's TINFOIL, all right, at checkout. Just head to ridgewallet.com and use the promo code
TINFOIL,
and you're all set. After your purchase, they will ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them you heard from us. That's one more time. That is, go to ridgewallet.com and use the promo code TINFOIL. Okay, TINFOIL. And we thank them for sponsoring the show.
One of the funny things about HIV is there have been millions of articles written about it. And, starting from the famous Gallo papers in 1984, which we should really probably discuss just a little bit, because those are the papers that are considered to sort of be the cornerstone of the entire HIV AIDS theory. And they're absolutely awful. They're so bad. For example, in one of them, Gallo took a cohort of 76 AIDS patients, and he only found HIV-related genetic material in 26 of them. And so that's fewer than half. And we're taught correlation is not causation, but that's a spurious correlation. And the theory should have been dead at that point, but it never did. It just kept going on and on and on. And even the Ho papers are kind of considered, even by the mainstream, to sort of be debunked at this point. They had ushered in the whole protease inhibitor treatment in the 90s, which, if you recall, it was like, oh my gosh, this is going to end AIDS. This is so great. Well, they don't even prescribe protease inhibitors anymore, unless they're part of Paxlovid. But you didn't know that half of the COVID antiviral Paxlovid is ritonavir, which is the original anti-HIV protease inhibitor that was used.
Oh my God.
Yep. These drugs are not specific. They're not specific, and they've also changed. Here's something that they've done that's really freaking sneaky is patients get their labs drawn, right? And they would get their CD4 T cells or helper T cells, and they would get their viral load. Now, the mainstream has decided to basically base disease stage only on viral load because they're concerned with this whole U equals U thing. And a lot of the time, they don't worry about T cells, and they say, well, actually, AIDS is a disease of massive inflammation, which is a big head scratcher because isn't that autoimmunity? Regardless.
When you say load, do you mean the amount of whatever they're looking for? Is that what it is? What that?
Okay,
load?
so viral load, it is sold to patients as this is the amount of the HIV virus you have per milliliter of blood. Okay. And that's, as we know, since they use PCR to find it, that's actually not what it is. And I mean, I follow some people on YouTube or whatever who are women who are HIV positive. And this one woman, she's talking about the PCR test for COVID, and she had no idea that was what was being used to measure her viral load. So, patients, I don't even know how much clinicians are aware of this. I saw a fellow named Zach Bush. He's a doctor. You might have heard of him. He was being interviewed during COVID, and he said a lot of the time, clinical work lags 20 years behind the medical literature. But the interesting thing about HIV is that basically the seeds of the destruction of their pet theory are right there in their papers. Like, you can completely falsify the HIV hypothesis simply by using their own data. But anyways, so now,
yes,
one of the reasons they don't concentrate on T cells as much anymore, first of all, there's the inflammation thing, but the reason they don't concentrate on it, and nobody will say this except for me, but this is true, you can look it up. Out of the patients that are virally suppressed on these drugs, 10 to 40% of them are called immunological non-responders, which basically means they have an undetectable viral load, but their T cells are still crap and they're still sick.
Oh my God. And like, I mean, I'm not, this is just what I've studied with this stuff. So like, if you get this one demographic with, say, gay men that are known for having somewhat of a risky lifestyle, right? Like,
well, some gay men, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, AIDS actually never really broke out fully in the homosexual community either. That's something that a lot of people don't talk about. It was, a subset of very fast lane gay men. Yes. Yeah.
So we'll call them fast lane gays. Mm-hmm. The fast lane gays, okay, that were like taking methamphetamines and
popping antibiotics.
Also doing those poppers, which were very big in the gay community. They were just wrecking their immune system from being up all day, not drinking, eating, not drinking water, not doing all that stuff that's important for your immune system. And they would go get tested, and it would show that they had low white cell counts. I could be wrong on this, but that's basically what they just found this demographic that had low immune system due to lifestyles. And they just told them hey, our tests, all these tests, you said.
Oh, and I mean, it's a tragedy because that whole community is in some sort of Stockholm syndrome. And that's, who they're marketing PrEP to. And they're trying to put these anti-HIV drugs into perfectly healthy people's bodies as a sort of prevention. Because after 40 years and over 100 vaccine trials, almost all of them have been abandoned for futility. And I mean, they're getting to the point where they're just saying, oh, let's just give you PrEP twice a year. Can you imagine the giant toxic dose of drugs that you would have to be given for something to protect you for 6 months? It's ridiculous. But another risk factor for the gay community that isn't talked about very much is douching. And that completely, and I have some people on my Substack that are gay men, and they say, well, some people do it and some people don't, but some guys, like, they'll go right up into the colon, and that really strips your microbiome, right?
Yes.
And also, it causes excess antibody production, and the antibodies, you get leaky gut, and the antibodies, these pathogens go into the bloodstream, and then your body mounts an antibody response. And so this non-specific antibody test for quote unquote HIV is actually more likely picking up what is referred to as hypergammaglobulinemia, which is basically too many antibodies to too many things, which basically just means their immune system is stressed because they have a lot of foreign challenges like toxins or funguses or whatever. But
oh my God, that is incredible.
Unfortunately, this whole community is being offered pre-exposure prophylaxis, and it's so incredibly racist and homophobic. Like, if you look at the ads, who they're targeting, and it's great to me because I get so many articles. It's like, African Americans just aren't taking PrEP as much as they should be, and I'm like, because they're smart enough to remember that they have been used and abused by the medical system. Hello, Tuskegee. Like, no wonder they're.
You're so right, and it's so crazy during COVID how, like, black celebrities were used to sell the black community on the vaccine, to the point that this very famous basketball player, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, was basically gaslighting anybody that wouldn't get the COVID vaccine. And now, I told you this, right, Johnny? Now he's doing commercials for heart problems. He's talking about how he has heart problems.
I haven't seen that. No, that's wild.
No, it's a radio ad, and because I'm old enough, I still listen to sports talk radio. Hey, it's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I have blah 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 fibrosis, and my doctors tell me my heart is having problems. I'm like, that is just.
Gee, I wonder why.
Yeah, how it started, how it's going, and it's just really crazy to me because he gaslit everybody that wouldn't get the vaccine. It's just crazy.
Oh my goodness. Yes, the bullying around the vaccine was insane. And it reminded me of, like, the behavior control. Both I have said before, and I will say it again, I really think that the response to AIDS was the clinical trial for the response to COVID. You want to control the population. Well, let's try it on a small subset of the population that's, see if it works there. And then we can pull out the big guns. And I really do think that there are some nefarious characters that were involved in this. And now, well, this is the Tinfoil Hats podcast, so this is fine for me to say.
Yeah, you can say anything.
That's like the Eddie Bravo theory, where first it was only Asians could get it.
Oh yeah,
and then
that's what they do is they get you to accept it for another demographic. They get you to accept it for someone that's not you, and once you accept it, that's real for them. Now you're captured. Because eventually they're going to roll it out. And then, they did it with HIV. Oh, gay men. And then out of nowhere, like, woman contracts HIV. Now they got you captured because you believe it's a real thing. Same thing with
and
COVID.
They'll tell you crazy stories, too. There was, like, that dentist back in the 90s that supposedly gave 5 patients HIV from, contaminated equipment, which is ridiculous. Even the mainstream says, this virus is so fragile that as soon as it is exposed to air, it dies. Which is why this is how they try to get out of this whole thing, this phenomenon that HIV positivity does not behave at all like an STI. It behaves much more like something genetic. It's been so incredibly constant in the population. They'll use language like, well, new HIV infections have dropped to this or whatever. But if you actually look over the past 40 years, and this is not just in the US, worldwide as well, 0.3 to 0.4% of the population is always HIV positive. And that's just a fact that they can't really get away from. But how they try to justify it being transmissible is they say, well, you have to get it in your bloodstream. Okay, so this is how they got around this whole thing, like women women cannot transmit to men. They can't, although they claim in Africa they can because it's a different strain of HIV, HIV-2, instead of HIV-1, which is supposedly more easily transmitted vaginally, despite the fact that HIV is a quasi-species. So how do you have HIV-1 and HIV-2, and how in 40 years has there been no mixing? I mean, it is ridiculous, the lies that they tell us, and people just are like, well, the drugs are so great and they turn this into a chronic manageable illness. So this, this whole thing is, we're done. People who question this are crazy. And like I said at the very beginning of the podcast, it amazes me how some really fairly intelligent people who were very quick to question COVID at the beginning, they refuse to even look into the possibility that HIV isn't what they think it is. It's like, why do they think that this is they're so skeptical of modern medicine, rightfully in many ways. There's been a lot of missteps that have been made. And yet somehow the HIV situation is the one shining example where they were honest with us and they got it all right, despite the fact that all of, the papers from the early days, we're constantly being told, oh, well, that paper's out of date. And yet at the same time, they'll talk about the millions of articles that have been written on HIV as massive, overwhelming evidence for the theory. So which is it? Are the papers out of date, or is it massive, overwhelming evidence? You can't have it both ways.
It's just absolutely insanity. And the question I have for you, and I don't want to jump too far ahead if you wanted to talk about it later, but when these people put these papers out, are they doing it maliciously, or have they convinced themselves, almost brainwashed themselves into what they're saying is right? Or do they say, here's an opportunity, here's an industry that is begging for any research that validates them selling more drugs to the population, them introducing what I will call, not you, me, a bioweapon. Here we go. Do they do it maliciously, do you think? Is there that kind of evil? I mean, we could have a discussion on Fauci, and I do think he's that kind of evil, but
my favorite villain in the AIDS story is Bob Gallo, and we will discuss his papers because they're very interesting. To be honest with you, I think that the vast majority of people who are working on this are just worker bees, and they fully believe what they're doing, and they haven't even seen alternatives. This goes back to how I was talking about some women who are HIV positive online who have their own channels don't even know that viral load is determined using PCR. So I think there has been some malice. I think that most of these, worker bees actually believe what they're thinking. I think a lot of people have deluded themselves into believing that this is true because their entire career rests on it. A lot of the early AIDS researchers had been cancer researchers that were trying to find a retroviral cause for cancer, and they couldn't find one in the 70s, during Nixon's war on cancer. And then, oh, thank God, AIDS came along so they could look for a retrovirus that was causing that. So, I mean, it was a virus in search of a disease in some sense. And there's this idea that all of a sudden emergency rooms were being overwhelmed by people who were sick. And there were a lot of people that died in the 80s. But the first 5 AIDS patients, Michael Gottlieb looked for them. He actively sought them out and then used this technology, this newly invented technology to count T cells to say, oh, look at this. We have a new disease that's depleting T cells, and we need to find some sort of a virus that's tropic for these T cells. And they settled on what was called HTLV3 at the time. And it was also called LAV, or lymphadenopathy associated virus, by the French, because this whole thing is full of scandal. And because Robert Gallo, the American researcher who claimed that he had found the cause of AIDS, and he had this whole press conference and everything, he was later found to be guilty of scientific misconduct because he had stolen Luc Montagnier's sample. Luc Montagnier was at the Pasteur Institute. He's the fellow who eventually got the Nobel Prize for discovering HIV. He also died during COVID, and he was also kind of a COVID critic. He was also a bit critical of HIV too. He said HIV couldn't cause AIDS without cofactors. But anyway, Bob Gallo stole his sample, appropriated it as his own, and then claimed, used that to patent his HIV test. And, there was a battle going on for a while, and they decided to let the French and the Americans both claim credit. But then the Nobel Committee clearly snubbed Gallo by giving the Nobel only to Montagnier. So with him,
so insane.
I would say he has a funny history. He had found he claimed that he'd found this retrovirus HL23V that was supposedly, I think it was supposed to cause leukemia or something, and he went on about it and made this big publicity, and it turned out that it wasn't even a real virus. It was like a mixture of like monkey and something else. It was like a laboratory artifact.
I was watching videos on docs on HIV early, and they were talking about how it was so hard for them to even find anything that they started like mixing in leukemia and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, in order to...
You're like, oh, yeah. I'm like, that's pretty shocking to me.
In order to express, have viral expression, these cultures have to be, they have to be stimulated with these mitogens, which, they'll cause cell death and various other things. And so what they're calling isolation is no such thing. And the orthodoxists will say, oh yes, we've isolated it, but there's never been a photograph of HIV particles in the density gradient at which they're supposed to band in the centrifuge. The best we can get are these sort of fake little pictures of something budding from a cell that isn't even the right size for a retrovirus. So it's never actually, HIV is a virtual virus. Its genome exists as a computer program, very similar to COVID. And that brings to mind another issue, is that what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the current research being done on HIV, and particular treatments, and also these shock and kill ideas that we're going to try to actually eliminate the virus entirely. A lot of these studies, they're not done on actual viruses or parts of viruses in the lab. They're done on the computer in silico.
Whoa,
so if you look up,
really? That's crazy.
Well, AI is the future, but yeah, no, a lot of these papers studying, especially drug development, a lot of them are done in silico. They're not actually done in people.
That is insane, dude. That they're not actually testing them on patients. These are all theoretical in a weird.
Well, not all of them, but a lot.
That is crazy.
The entire epidemic is not what it's presented to be. Let's just put it that way. And I do think that there is something dark and sinister going on with this, particularly with the way that African Americans are targeted, and also Africans. You probably heard about the PEPFAR, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Research or Treatment, or whatever it is. Bobby Kennedy basically ended PEPFAR. It's going to be ended, and so they're saying, oh well, how are we going to get these AIDS drugs to these African countries? It's like, maybe they'd be better off without them.
No, I totally agree with that. I'm in recovery, and one of my buddies way back, I haven't talked to him in years, but he was just a wild man. He was a speed freak, and he was, trying to get sober. And I would find him. He wouldn't show up to the meetings for a while, so I'd go to his house, see what he's doing, and sure, he's just tweaking. And we would just get to talking, and he was telling me that he's off his AIDS meds. And I would go, maybe that's a good thing, dude. Maybe you should try to see like how your body's going to react to this, because, COVID comes and then suddenly, unceremoniously, they say they cured AIDS. And I go, this is a humongous event. And you just told us you cured this thing that we were told was uncurable. And there's no parades. There's no whoever did it was walking around, getting all this, going on the Tonight Show, talking to, Jimmy Fallon about this great feat that he did. Nothing, dude, nothing. There was no discussion on it at all, because, then there was going to be this talk about how COVID causes AIDS. And I thought that was very interesting.
Even with the creation of PrEP, I thought there would be more excitement. Like, oh my God, they created something where you're never going to catch AIDS or HIV. And nope, it seemed I just heard about it on TV, and it was kind of like,
there's no discussion of it at all.
If you don't mind, I'd like to talk about PrEP for a little bit, because I have been since my return to writing about AIDS, I've been focusing quite a lot on the drugs, and because the drugs are their Achilles heel, because the theory has failed to explain or predict anything. I mean, it's not sexually transmitted. If you look at prostitutes, they only test positive if they're also on drugs. There's evidence in the medical literature that it's they say something like it's like for male to female, it's 1 in 1,000 per sexual encounter with an HIV positive person uninfected, and it's actually less. It's actually less than that. There's not really any evidence that it's transmissible at all. So basically, the theory has failed to explain or predict. It's been contradicted a bunch of times. Quietly, if you look online, you will see that they don't refer to HIV disease so much as a low T cell disease, but as a disease of massive inflammation. And that is a big red flag to me, because inflammation is a lot more like autoimmunity, and that would make some sense, especially if you're talking about people with this excess antibody production because their systems are so stressed from whatever. I mean, certainly, if this is something that's somewhat genetically related, which the demographics hint to me that it is, there's probably a good reason why African Americans mount a higher antibody response, and it probably has something to do with the tropical diseases that they've grown up with, growing up on that continent. It's just, it just makes sense. It's also, they have darker skin because they don't need to absorb as much vitamin D from the sun, that sort of thing. So I like to talk about the drugs because it's really the only. That's the only reason that we're under this spell that, HIV causes AIDS and we've managed to fix it with these drugs. And that is demonstrably not true. I mentioned the 10 to 40% of these people are immunological non-responders. So even if their viral load is undetectable, they're still not well. But also, here's something that probably a lot of people don't know. In the United States and in most of the world, there's a couple of African countries where there's very high uptake of drugs. But in almost every country, only about 70% of HIV positive individuals are on treatment at all. And so my question, and so then you add in the immunological non-responders, where is the giant 1980s style AIDS epidemic? Where is it? It's just not here. So,
well, are we talking about in Africa? Because isn't that the whole thing? Like everyone's got it.
Well, it's certainly more prevalent in Africa. However, the population of Africa has, skyrocketed over the last 4 decades. So I'm not sure how much damage AIDS can be doing. Also, something that you may not know is that in a lot of African countries, you don't even need to test to test positive. They have something called the Bangui definition, where you can be diagnosed based on symptoms, and there are things like, diarrhea for more than a month or something, or elevated fever. It's like super. Yeah, I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think they're pretty good at getting test kits to people, but I mean, the whole thing.
That's kind of like that when that doctor asked you, "Are you good?"
Yeah.
He was just if he wanted you to give him the right answer, to be like, "Okay, you got it."
Oh yeah. Ask her what she thinks was going on there.
So I'd say about 8 years ago, I wasn't feeling good, and my girlfriend was like, "Go down and get a blood test." And I was like, "Okay."
For what?
I don't know. I forget what the thing was, but she wanted me to get a blood test, or I went there to get checked, and they wanted to give me a blood test. I don't know, but my girlfriend told me to go to this one clinic that I would go, this walk-in clinic near my house. So I go in there, and I'm sitting there, and they're like, "We're going to do blood work on you." I'm like, "Okay, go for it." And I'm sitting there waiting for blood work. And then this doctor came in. He walked right up to me. He goes, "I got to ask you something." I go, "What?" He goes, "Are you gay?" I go, "No." "Why?" He goes, "Okay." And he walked out. And I was just like that. Why is that one legal? Are you legally allowed to ask people that question? Because
you would know what to test.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he would know what to test. He didn't even have to ask you if anything.
What do you mean?
Well,
How would
a
he know
lot
what
of the
this-
time,
Right.
they will ask you those questions when they give you the HIV test, and if there's any sort of like, is it borderline? Like, it's, maybe we're not sure if it's positive or not. Like, we only got one of the 10 bands or something. They will use your self-confessed risk group status to push that to a yes or a no.
Whoa!
So he said, yeah.
Wow, dude.
That is
And it probably happens with other
crazy.
sicknesses as well.
Because you got a weird vibe off of when he was asking, right?
Oh,
You
it
told
was
that to me
very
before. Yeah,
creepy. It was straight out of a movie. Creepy asked question.
Right.
Do you have?
That is creepy.
Are you gay?
That is really
I was
creepy.
like, oh, dude, are you hitting on me right now? Like, what are we doing right here? No, get out of here.
He was probably trying to figure out if he should give you an HIV test.
Yeah. No, but I
here's
did get the test because it came back. You know, Gareth Reynolds has the best joke about waiting for your HIV test. Like every time the phone rings, you're like, no, I got AIDS, right? So,
You know what's the worst
So
one?
we were, and then they say, hey, no, you don't got anything. Then again, you get tests when you get health and life insurance. So, yeah, that's super interesting.
Oh, you know
man.
what's the worst one? I just went and like said blood work, and they're like, hey, do you want to get tested for STDs? I'm like, yeah, I'm already here, whatever. I'm at work. I missed the phone call. And they hit me with the, hey, you need to call us back. My life flashed. Instead of him saying, hey, you're negative, give me a call back though. No, he left me with, this is your doctor. I need you to call me back whenever you get a chance. And I'm mid shift. I can't even take care of my table that I was serving at the moment in time because I'm like, yo, like I think I have like something. I need to go get tested. I wanted to cry at the shift. I want to go tell my manager, like, yo, I need to go call the doctor. He's like, go handle. But it literally those 2 seconds at that moment in life, I was like, bro.
So at the height of COVID, I just come back from Wisconsin doing this gig, and for some reason, and if you listen, I do love you, it's okay, but for some reason, or her, I don't know who it was, emailed me that they had COVID and they just wanted me to know that they did a meet and greet with me and they wanted to let me know. So I freaked out because now there's a paper trail, and we were in the middle of COVID and we didn't know what was going to happen, and I'm like, can I get sued because I was told that I was near somebody with COVID and I didn't go get tested. So I tell everybody in my house. It was I was at the time I lived with my kids. It was my kids, the mother of my children, and the babysitter. And she was happened to be there because she was either getting, I forget the exact why she was there at that time, but she's there. And I had to go to each one of them and tell them that I had COVID. Well, no, I want to tell them. So I go down, I get tested. They take this long thing and it just bam, jam it. I'm like, what is that? And and this was early on, dude. They were talking about it was going to take forever to get tested. By the time I got home, which was about 15 minutes later, I get a call from the clinic that I got the test at. And dude, this guy answered, like when I answered the phone, this guy talked to me like it was a funeral. He goes, man, I don't know how to tell you this, but
you have COVID.
You have COVID. I'm so sorry. I'm like, how did you get that? I go to myself, how did he get that test so quickly? So here's the thing. So I get told I'm positive for COVID. I have to go tell everybody. Everybody's freaking out. My brother, who is like at the time was the most scared person of COVID. He just happened to be driving into town to see me from Phoenix, Arizona. He walks into the house. I go, Jay, I have to tell you something. He goes, what's up? I go, I have COVID. And dude, his face dropped. The color in his skin dropped. Hand to God, he starts moving around like a broken robot, like short circuiting. He doesn't know what to do. He walks through my living room, out the door, into my car, and drives to New York. He drives right to New York, right? Everybody in the house gets tested. Nobody has COVID. Do you know the only person who got tested and had COVID? My brother.
That's so funny.
No. He even went to New York and he didn't have COVID. Nobody had COVID. Nobody got COVID. He went to New York and nobody got COVID. Sorry to cut you off right there.
Oh, you're fine. I have a very interesting story about the COVID tests. It's a tangent, so I can go on it or not if you want to.
We're down for whatever. This episode has been great. Thank you.
So when COVID started, my parents were living in Ontario in like this tiny little cottage country. And they decided that they wanted to buy a winter home in Texas. So they purchased a house around the corner from us, and they came down right about when the whole COVID thing was in the news, and it was hitting Italy and all of the stuff, and everybody was really scared. My husband and I were just like, yeah, this is going to be another Zika. It's just going to, go away. And my parents were, terrified of this. My father had Parkinson's disease, and I had been told since then that the fear-mongering and the social isolation was really detrimental to people who had neurological disorders, and I can certainly say that's true with my dad. But after about a month, my mother kind of figured out that this is complete bullshit. She started to trash Fauci all the time.
Yeah.
All this stuff, but they had to leave. So they were in Texas when it hit, and then they had to leave because they were closing the border down. And so they hightailed it back to Canada, and we're sort of here, and everything's shut down. In Texas, it wasn't shut down for that long, actually. I think by summer, everything was pretty much, 2020, everything was pretty much opened up again. I never had any COVID symptoms for the longest time. But I had to get tested because my dad had Parkinson's, and in fall of 2021, he was getting much, much worse. And my mom said, you need to come up because I don't know how long he's gonna be here. So I had my daughter with me, who was too young to be vaccinated. I had to take the vaccine to enter the country. I had no choice because I'm no longer a Canadian resident. Okay. So we get there, we go to the border, there's nobody there. It was like dead quiet, absolutely nobody there, which is crazy. Like every time I've ever been to the border, it was, lines stretching over the bridge for ages. They pull us back and they give my daughter and I COVID tests. And they give me a test kit and say, you need to test again on day 8, which was the day we were planning on leaving. Okay, so we go to Canada. It's crazy. Everybody's wearing masks everywhere, all of this stuff. And Dad seemed to be sort of doing better for a while. And then I go home. Okay. Fast forward to July 2022, I find out that Dad's fallen and he's in the emergency room, but they don't have enough beds because it's a cottage town and it's like an 8-bed hospital, and they've got all these, people from out of town who are getting sick or whatever. So he was stuck in the lobby, and he was given a contraindicated dose of Haldol because he was so anxious. And after that dose of Haldol, he basically became paralyzed and never got better. But here's where the story
gets. What does Haldol do? What does that?
It's an antipsychotic, but I think it's supposed to, calm people down who are having like a psychotic episode, because he was like trying to climb the walls or whatever. I wasn't there, so I don't exactly know what happened. I know that the doctor who gave the Haldol, my mother's got him in some sort of legal trouble in Canada. He's probably just going to get a slap on the wrist. But anyways, it's never, ever to be given to a dementia patient. That's the takeaway you have to get from that. Anyway, a few days later, I get this call from my sister, and she says, Dad's tested positive for COVID. And my mother, it turned out the hospital policy was total isolation for 10 days. And my mother said, this is going to kill him. We can't do this. And the only way to not do this was to admit him into palliative care, which basically is the end of the line. And at that point, it was clear he was in kidney failure. His urine was black or whatever. So I'm still in Texas at the time. I go back up with my daughter. I enter the hospital. My sister comes running out of the room. She's in full PPE. There's like a big stop sign, caution sign outside the door. Okay. She comes up to me and she goes, you got to get Miriam. That's my daughter. She said, you got to get Miriam out of here. She's an unvaccinated minor, and Health Canada has been calling us. So apparently Health Canada had been calling my mother's house and my sister's house because Dad tested positive on a PCR test. Wow. But he was asymptomatic. Okay. He was asymptomatic. So I go up there with my daughter.
Holy cow.
So my daughter gets sent off to my sister's house. She's going to go stay there with my, her cousins or whatever. And I was going to stay with my youngest sister. So there's two younger sisters. I'm the oldest. I also have an older half sister, but she wasn't involved. Anyways, when a patient is in palliative care, you don't actually have to wear PPE in the room, but we would have to put it on and then go into the room and then take it off, right? And after a while,
what's a PPE? Is that a hazmat suit?
Protective equipment. Yeah, it's the mask, the gloves, the gown, the whole thing.
My dude, we're gonna look back on it and go, what were we doing?
We're already doing that.
You're right. We're there.
the story gets crazier, though. The story really gets crazier. So we basically ditched the PPE. After the first few days, I was like, crap, Dad needs to see my face and all of this stuff. And he's getting worse and worse and worse. He never, after the Haldol, he was basically paralyzed. He never moved again. And then he eventually just stopped taking water. He would refuse it. And he didn't take water for 5 days. I don't know how he survived. Anyways, we're in this tiny little room with this supposed COVID patient. It's not ventilated. Nobody's wearing any protective gear. None of us get sick. Here's the interesting thing. I had been involved in this antibody study for Texas because they wanted to see, natural versus vaccine-acquired antibodies or whatever. And I'd had 3 blood draws. And I remember at the time thinking, I'm really sad that the antibody study is over because I'd really like to see what my antibodies look like. I didn't get COVID from my dad, so maybe I already had it because I knew the vaccine didn't do crap, right? I took the vaccine knowing that it wouldn't help me and knowing there was a possibility it could really hurt me. And it was a calculated risk I took because I wanted to be with my dad. And luckily I've had no negative effects. So I only took the initial one. I never took a booster. One of my relatives has had all the boosters and was just diagnosed with myocarditis. So there you have it. Anyways, so eventually, I had it's where my parents live is like, it's very hard to get to. You can take 3 days to drive there, or you can take 2 days and you'll fly to, Toronto if you want to go into Canada, or Detroit, which is what I choose to do, and then rent a car and drive the rest of the way. So it takes 2 days, even if you're flying, to get there. So we had to leave. Dad was still with us. I have no idea why. I wasn't going to be able to stay for a funeral. It turned out he died the next morning while I was waiting for the airplane. And, that was horrible.
Sorry for your
flight
loss.
attendant. The flight attendant offered me wine at 10 in the morning. I'm like, that's very sweet of you, but it's a bit early. Anyways, so I get home. So here's the interesting thing. I get home and I get a text from Texas Care saying, "Oh, we're extending our antibody study. Can you come in for a 4th blood draw?" I'm like, hell yeah. I want to see what happens. No natural antibodies. They'd assumed I didn't get sick because I must have had COVID in the past. Nope. I was in this room for 10 days with a supposed COVID patient who was not being given antivirals. I should have had COVID. I mean, I feel like it's an anecdote, but I feel like that's a pretty powerful anecdote.
100%.
Yes.
I mean, we just did, we do a comedy show on the road, and I was with a good friend of mine named Eddie Bravo. And he was just talking about all these times they've tried to isolate a virus, put in a new host, and they never saw infection. And it's just really crazy to me, man. It's just really crazy that there's people out there that you say are worker bees, and I totally respect that. But it's just like the powers that be with all the money and cash, they just don't care about lying. It's just so crazy to me. And the whole thing kicks off because we see these videos out of China of people falling. And we're like, oh, you're going to get COVID and fall. You
need a dramatic visual. And they had that with AIDS too, with Kaposi sarcoma. I think everybody remembers that movie with Tom Hanks, Philadelphia, where he finds like
Tom
a Kaposi sarcoma lesion. And so, yes, you need a really strong visual to scare people immediately. And it's funny because Kaposi sarcoma is not even considered to be caused by HIV anymore. It's considered to be caused by a herpes virus. So it was useful at the time. Let's put it that way.
I want to get into that because we have a little debate on the show. But so we never saw people falling until the vaccine. And now we see all these videos of people, their hearts just stopping and they just kind of drop. And then, this is a totally different subject, but the discussion of like what the COVID vaccine and the COVID procedures did in China and the amount of people that may no longer be with us, the numbers are staggering. They talk about their population might be a fourth of what everybody, or a third of what everybody thinks it actually is. It's absolutely shocking. And all that was done because, you just had these things, they kick it off with this super dramatic stuff. And that, and that's a big part of the internet too. Like if someone gets stabbed in Cincinnati, you start thinking it might be happening on the corner in Texas or in Los Angeles. That it's like these television, especially when they went to the 24-hour news cycle, and then the internet are trauma deliverance systems.
So if we're going to talk about AIDS and COVID, and I'm going to get a little conspiratorial here. I do think
we're all
COVID
about it.
Yeah, I do think COVID was planned. Okay, I'm not sure AIDS was planned, but I think it was greatly taken advantage of. The fact that they had just developed this technology to count T cells, and it coincided with, the gay liberation, and some of these fast lane gay men took that as, open season to, just act as crazy as possible. And I mean, Carrie
Boys
Mullis
will be boys.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because Carrie Mullis said this. He said this is not anti-gay. It's not God's wrath or anything like that. If you take a number of highly mobile homosexual men who are having sex with hundreds and hundreds of people, the immune system is like a camel. You cannot keep adding those straws to the camel's back. It's going to break. You don't need any virus to explain that at all. But like I said, the definition of AIDS has been slyly changed. I mean, they still do count T cells, but it's really considered to be an inflammatory condition, which is interesting because I had mentioned the protease inhibitors. And if you're, as old as me, you probably remember when the protease inhibitors came out in the 90s and everybody was like, oh, phew, this is finally going to fix things. Everybody's, this is a great miracle drug. Well, turned out not to be. People were getting heart problems. They were having these horrible fat redistribution, lipodystrophy sort of things. They kind of quietly stopped prescribing the protease inhibitors. Now, these drugs are usually given as a combination of 2 or 3 medications. At the beginning, you probably are aware in 87, they treated it with AZT monotherapy,
Yes.
AZT being a failed cancer chemotherapeutic whose job was to kill cells. And so a lot of the people that died in the 80s and early 90s, like Arthur Ashe, for example, were victims of AZT.
Yes.
Okay, so AZT, here's the interesting thing. AZT is what's known as a nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, which is a bunch of nonsense, and it's a fancy way of saying that it terminates DNA synthesis because it acts like an amino acid that's going to close the loop. Okay, so the idea is it's very much like chemotherapy. Let's see if we can kill as many cells that harbor HIV as possible without killing the patient. Okay, so then they come up with the protease inhibitors, but they're still using the nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitors, and even today, those drugs in the same class as AZT are the backbone of anti-HIV treatments, but they've added in the drug they've used to replace the protease inhibitor is something called an integrase inhibitor, which targets a certain enzyme. But here's the thing that's about integrase inhibitors that's interesting. They're potent anti-inflammatories. So I think a lot of the time they're saying the quiet part out loud. It's so easy to find the truth. I mean, literally all you have to do is read their papers. Like we haven't talked about PrEP yet. PrEP is this idea that, since we don't have a vaccine, we're going to give HIV-negative people anti-HIV drugs to prevent them from seroconverting or going from negative to positive. And this came out in 2011, and it didn't really start to hit the mainstream until maybe 2018, 2019. And so when you're on these drugs, you have to be tested every 3 months, I think, to see if you haven't seroconverted. Well, what happens if you have seroconverted? Well, they just give you more drugs, so you're retained in care for a lifetime, negative or positive. But I mean, it gets crazier than that, because now they're finding. Okay, so if you look at the papers, let me backtrack a little bit. It used to be on the advertisements, those horrible television advertisements and various print advertisements, they would say PrEP is greater than 99% effective. Well, that is bullshit, and I can prove it because I have gone over the iPrEP study and some of the other PrEP studies with a fine-tooth comb. And basically, what happened is that on PrEP, I think there was 30% of people contracted it versus not on PrEP. It was 60%. So it wasn't 90% effective. But what they did was they said, oh, well, these people that seroconverted, they weren't taking enough PrEP, and so their adherence wasn't good enough. So they tossed that variable out and didn't even include it. So basically, they'll say PrEP failures are rare. First of all, the clinical trials showed nothing close to 100% efficacy at preventing seroconversion, which, if my theory that it's not an infectious disease is true, makes perfect sense. Anyway, they'll say it's greater than 99% effective, and they'll say, the PrEP failures are rare. It is never, ever the case that a drug performs better in the wild than it did in clinical trials.
Yeah.
Like ever. That never happens. And the reason why they say PrEP failures are rare, and I looked this up as well, is that anytime anybody wasn't perfectly adherent, they don't consider that as them being on PrEP. So it's completely fudged. The data are completely fudged.
That's like when they get you on insurance or something or a warranty. Oh, you didn't do this perfectly. It does, your policy, you can't. We're canceling.
That happened with one of my friends had like full warranty on his car, but since the dealership didn't change the windshield wipers, it didn't cover his warranty.
That is insanity.
They were charging him like $80 to change the windshield wipers. He's like, I can do this at AutoZone. He did it when his car broke down. He was like, hey, I paid for the warranty. And I'm like, well, we told you to do everything at the dealership. I think he's going to get it because he kind of got a lawyer, but it's this thing where they will fight you for anything. If you don't do it the way they say, your warranty is voided. Absolutely ridiculous.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question that I'm nervous to hear the answer to. We debate this a lot on the show. So, do you think they've ever isolated a virus? You're on tinfoil hat.
Well, first you have to define isolate, right?
What I've been told isolation is that
isolate, Sam,
Johnny, shut up. So you let's say you take a petri dish or whatever and you put the blood sample in there, a tissue sample, and you're able to completely get rid of everything else down to the virus. Then you take that virus out, you put it in, you basically take it out of a host, put it in a petri dish, clean everything out, take that virus out of the petri dish, isolate it, put it in another host, and it has the same exact reaction. Then you take that out of another host, do the same thing, clean it all up so it's isolated down to a virus, and take it and put it into another host and have it happen the same exact results.
Well, I'm loath to really to answer this because my answer is a cop out. My answer is I don't know.
Okay, I'll take it.
I focus on HIV. I know I'm very, very familiar with the whole no virus idea. I've been on Sam Bailey's podcast. I think that they do really good work. So here's what I like to say, and people ask me this about HIV, but this applies to many other viruses as well. I'm trying to think about how to phrase this effectively. Okay, so some people will say to me, I get the idea that you think HIV exists because of the way that you talk about it. Do you think HIV exists? And some of them get very belligerent and say, you have to tell me you don't believe HIV exists. And I say, look, you can never prove non-existence. It is not possible. The best you can do is have a preponderance of evidence against a particular theory, which the Perth group, they're no longer really a group anymore because Eleni Papadopoulos-Iliopoulos, who is sort of the head of that whole group, she passed away. See, I told you, all of these AIDS critics passed away during COVID. I'm glad I'm still alive.
I'm glad you're alive too.
Anyways, so what I would say about HIV is that it has never been isolated nor proven to exist as an exogenous retrovirus. I think probably, and I don't know what to say about other viruses. My husband, he's a mathematician, but he also has a horticulture degree.
You guys are
so
great.
He talks about really plant viruses a lot, and I don't know. I'm not. I mean, I think that our body produces endogenous retroviruses all the time, and probably HIV is one of them. So the question is, we're swimming in a sea of bacteria and virus-like particles and all sorts of stuff. We have mites living on our eyelashes and that kind of thing. So I would not say something like, I don't think viruses exist, because I do think that they're, I'm gonna say I don't know.
Okay, I respect that, and I'm a lot closer to that, Johnny, than you think. I do think there's something there. I just don't think it's this. Oh my God, breathe it in and I get sick. And
I was in a room with you for 90 minutes.
Yeah, but Johnny, I want to talk about that because you brought that up. I also want to say this to you is that the day before, and you might have been there too, where you said you've been doing a lot of editing and you're super tired. And
I think I probably wouldn't have gotten it if I hadn't been sleepy, but I got it from you.
So
I'm sure.
I think it's, and this is a totally different subject.
Your immune system's weak, or when you don't sleep.
Yeah, I think it's that you had a weak immune system from anxiety, doing a lot of work and doing all that. And we appreciate your work. But that did happen when Dana and I got sick. It was when taxes had to get done and we were way behind and we were freaking out and like, getting it done and how much we're going to pay. So our anxiety, we weren't getting good sleep. And I don't know, we call it baby AIDS here. We call it baby AIDS. But, our daughters who know what they had. And I think we just all kick it off on each other. I'm not going to get into the...
There is this thing what was Dana telling us they called it earlier? Razor throat?
Razor cut or something?
Yes, I heard about the razor blade throat thing. That's going to scare us about COVID again. I had preparing for talking to you all. I had listened to a couple of your podcasts, and the one that I really was interested in was the one about snake venom.
Yes,
because a very close friend of ours, he completely subscribes to the theory that COVID was snake venom in the water, and
in skies too. I think they spray it.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. I don't know where I stand on that. I had COVID in at Thanksgiving of 2022. My mother-in-law she always hosts Thanksgiving, and she was one of the most COVID scared people that I've ever met. So she gave us a bunch of tests, and she's like, "You're sick, so you need to test." So I tested positive, and my husband, who had the same symptoms, tested negative. And she's like, "I can't believe you're not doing Thanksgiving this year," but she'd canceled it the 2 years before because she was afraid of COVID.
And it's crazy how people got
out. The kids never got sick, so I don't know what to say about that, right?
Was it, when you had it, symptomatically, was it a novel experience for you? Because we lost smell and things that we'd never really had before, like weird.
Okay, so I would say, for me, I had minimal respiratory symptoms. I would say it was worse than a cold, but not as bad as a flu. Yeah. I had a fever for 3 days, which is very unusual for me. I don't tend to mount fevers very often. I think most grown-ups don't. So I had a fever for 3 days, and then I had a few days in, I got the most excruciating muscle pain in my lower back, which my husband also had. And so that was the only thing that was different from anything else.
Yeah, so to me, I don't doubt that there is something, to borrow their phrase, novel about whatever that was, unique.
Yeah, but was it a toxin? Like,
exactly.
Is it a contagious virus?
And then you throw 5G in there.
I mean, it comes back to the PCR testing, right? This is an epidemic of testing.
What do you think about at-home testing? What do you think about those COVID tests at home? Is there any efficacy at whatever to those? Because I tend to doubt it.
Considering the anecdote I just told you about my husband and myself, I don't really think that they tell you much.
No, right? Yeah, it seems like not. Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a giant mind effing. That's what I believe it was, and they were preparing.
I think they wanted to see how much they could control us, and I think I was actually surprised at how quickly a lot of people started to rebel. I didn't expect that because it hadn't happened with AIDS. But the difference being, of course, is that AIDS is this niche thing that only affects certain risk groups. It was never a danger. HIV disease was never a danger to the general population. And that became very clear, within a few years, notwithstanding Oprah saying by 1990, 1 in 5 heterosexuals may be dead from AIDS.
Yeah, it's crazy. And the numbers that Joe Rogan came around on the COVID hoax and stuff, but early on, he was very much scared of it. And he had that guest on that just was like, there's going to be body bags everywhere. And that had a big kickoff to a lot of it, and it's not his fault because, I always say this about Rogan. Most of the things that Rogan, where you go, oh, well, he thought this, I would say most people thought that. Most people were in alignment. It was like this small group of people.
Most people did.
Yeah, so I don't fault him for that.
Me and my sisters, we caught onto it basically immediately. I'm just cynical about everything, but it smacked so much of the way that they treated AIDS, and I knew from my background in mathematical biology that lockdowns were not going to work. Like I said, you have to lock down before the pathogen's even out of the barn, or else it's just, it's too late. But I mean, I remember getting into fights with my husband about lockdowns, and he would compare it to like being in a war zone. Like if you're in a war zone, you need to stay inside your house. And so this was like March or something. And I remember by May, I remember him he's like, "You were right."
That's got to feel good. It's also, you get into
it's
like
the
how
three
much
favorite words everybody likes to hear.
Yeah, for sure. But it's also when you get into like, oh, they want to see how much they could control us. The rules were crazy. Like, I can go to a restaurant if I'm sitting down, but if I get up, I'm in the danger zone.
That's idiot.
And then Gavin Newsom was the worst, and it's like that just I think it personally destroyed his political career.
I think he just won it back.
I still think he's done. I think that whole thing.
He's toast. He's gotta be toast. I hope so.
When he was like, "Hey, you got locked down. You got to stay home. We can't stop this COVID spread," but at the same time, I'm going to release all of these prisoners from jail because of COVID. We don't want them to get COVID. You go, how can you hold those two thoughts at one time? And the truth was that they were setting up the BLM riots. That's exactly what they were doing.
I just remember feeling so vindicated. Not that I wanted that to happen, but it's like clearly they don't believe their own narrative.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, 100%.
Well, I mean, he was at French Laundry,
Yeah, he didn't even close down his own winery. He's such a fraud. But the last thing is this, is like when you talk about AIDS and you talk about COVID, another thing is you talk about AZT and how that was a cancer drug. Now you get into remdesivir, like we were talking about the snake venom, and like how there's been this concerted effort to blame ventilators for people to dying, when I personally believe to stack up the body count to scare people into basically martial law, which to give these powers to the government that they're never going to give away. They were hitting them with the really toxic remdesivir at the beginning. Like the Ebola version that killed 50% of the people that took it when you did the blind testing.
We should clarify that point, though. That's 50% of people who also had Ebola. It didn't just kill people across the board 50% of the time. The 50% death rate for that, it was among people who had Ebola.
Yeah, but that was versus people that got a placebo that also had Ebola.
Right, exactly. They all had it. But to be clear, that I looked into that. It is the 50% who died all had Ebola. So
and the 50% that
it was worse than placebo, but they also had Ebola.
But it was fake.
It's not like you take a random person, you give them remdesivir, and it's a coin flip whether they live or die.
Yeah, but it was taken off the thing because it was so toxic.
Yeah, it sucks.
And then they make this drug, and they want to make money off of something they invented. So now they found, and then you had Trump saying, I took remdesivir. It's so amazing, so powerful. And then you're seeing people getting banged with this. And then, for as much as we shit all over the TikTok nurses, there were nurses going, dude, they're hitting them with this remdesivir and it's killing them.
What do you think Trump's end of that was?
I think Trump is, I think he's...
Because he didn't know what the fuck. He never
I don't think he knows any. I think he's just a better speaker than Biden. I don't think he's mashed potatoes like Biden, but I think I don't think he has as much say as we want to believe he does. And I think they have something on that he has to do what they want. Yeah. That's where we're at. Man, this was a fire podcast. Fire podcast.
I really do think, though, that, I mean, when you want to talk about malice, my witnessing of what they did to my father, and he was listed as a COVID death, by the way, despite being
That's
asymptomatic
so
and
crazy.
having Parkinson's. I really do think that they euthanized a lot of elderly people and called them COVID deaths to pump up the COVID numbers. And Canada, especially Canada, would do that because they love to kill people that they can't keep alive anymore.
Control.
With the medical assistance in dying, this is the logical endpoint of universal health care. Is you can't afford to keep people alive.
Yes,
people
good
don't understand.
point.
People don't understand that you would need to tax people at 75% in order for them to have full healthcare, even in Canada, like if you're over 18, you have to get vision and dental insurance privately and prescription drug insurance. You know, there's no free lunch. And so now they've got this medical assistance in dying, and they're offering it to like people who don't even have terminal illnesses. It's like sick. You're like, you don't have enough money to take care of your people. And what's the solution? Well, let's just kill them off. I mean, it's evil.
And the death is
honestly.
like, they think it's like, oh, it's like going to sleep. They're like, no, I forget her name.
Oh, apparently it's really violent. Apparently the people are paralyzed and they're basically
drowning
to death.
They're drowning and they're paralyzed.
It's horrible. Yeah.
Well,
no, my sister actually has a friend who took MAID for COPD.
It's funny, around
really
that time there were stories around that time too about people in hospice. They were finding out that far more people than we realized die of opiate overdose while undergoing palliative care. So I wonder also if around that time they were co-administering COVID drugs and for people with COVID and
God knows what they're
opioids,
giving
and overdosing people. On
I mean,
opioids.
I know the reason that doctor gave my dad the Haldol was because this is a difficult patient. Sedate him. We don't. I don't want to deal with the difficult patient. Who cares if he's paralyzed and basically is locked in until he dies? But anyway.
It's crazy. Rebecca, this has been an absolute all-time banger.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I love it. I have a couple friends I'm going to send it to, see if they'll actually listen to it. Rebecca, one more time, can you tell us where they can find you? And is there a certain place you want them to go to find your books?
Oh, well, I mean, Amazon, I guess. So my book, The Real AIDS Epidemic, which was published in 2023, that came about because I had been cited in Bobby Kennedy's big book on Fauci several times, and they wanted to republish. Science sold out with, a new forward and an afterward. So it's quite a bit. It's almost twice as long as the original. So that book is called The Real AIDS Epidemic. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those sorts of places. It's also available as a Kindle. I have a little mini ebook called The Truvada and PrEP Disaster. And we didn't even get into the whole Truvada lawsuits. There's a 26,000 person class action lawsuit
for PrEP?
Against Gilead. For PrEP and for ARVs. Truvada is an NRTI, a nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor. Oh. And
oh my, it's just so I wish people, I mean, you bring this stuff up to gay people, they get so offended. I knew somebody.
A lot of them, it's funny because a large portion of my audience are gay men who have woken up, and they all say the same thing. They say these guys, they're in some sort of a Stockholm syndrome with their medical providers because they take all the vaccines, everything. Like they're just completely like retained in care, always going to the doctor, and he kind of sees it as like a brainwashing sort of a thing.
Conformity for sure. It's very weird how this kind of outlaw lifestyle for a very long time has been co-opted by conformity. Like they can't conform enough. Like everything is conformity.
Well, it's also suggesting the people they've lost, were lost, in vain.
Well, yeah, that's a scary thing. Yeah. Like we lost so many people in the AIDS epidemic, and that changes to I've had so many of my friends massacred by the government and big pharmaceuticals.
That's a different proposition.
But you know what's crazy about the people that take PrEP? They actually party really hard. Anybody that I know that's on PrEP, anybody that I know that's on PrEP, they're not taking it because their significant other has HIV. It's because they want to raw dog the world.
Yeah, it's not
because that was the point of PrEP. If you watch the commercial, it tells you
what PrEP is.
Yeah, it tells you it's like did you fall in love with the significant other? And I literally was like, I thought you were single to one of my gay friends, and he just looked at me. He's like, that's why you think we take it? And I was like, oh, that is not the purpose of this. Well, that's not why they made it.
Xavier Guerrero, Rebecca. Xavier Guerrero.
I get what you're saying there. They're not like backstopping condoms with that.
That's not.
Not like an emergency.
They found their new condom. That's their new condom. It's like I'm just on PrEP now.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
So those are my books. Okay.
Thank you.
It's self-published. It's available as a Kindle. But the main place where you would want to find me is my Substack, which I share with a writer named Nina Ostrom, who writes a lot about chronic fatigue syndrome, which we sort of. It's interesting because it came out around the same time as AIDS, but mostly affects women, and it has a lot of the same sort of immunological oddities that AIDS has. So
really?
It's the two of us, and it's the Substack is also called The Real AIDS Epidemic, but the URL is just my name, RebeccaCulshawSmith.substack.com.
Okay, I'll make sure that's all in the description.
And I do podcasts, I do live streams, I do some writing, like a mix of everything. So,
well, if you ever have anything else you ever want to talk about, you have an open door. You can come back anytime.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you hanging out with us. And this was one of my favorite episodes ever. So thank you so much. Let's break down the episode. All right, let's get into it, guys. Rebecca Culshaw Smith came and dropped the hammer of the gods on us.
Nice. You
Thoughts,
didn't call her a dude that time. That was
I did not. I did not. I'm so sorry.
He was like, got that name, dude. Hey, what's up, bro? That was so good, man.
I like how Johnny remembered that.
Yeah,
The whole
of course he
episode.
does.
So
Johnny
many bombs dropped. And,
that's what Johnny wants to bring up. But I called our female guest a dude. Thank you, Johnny. That's really nice.
Yeah, on the AIDS episode, too.
Good episode.
On the AIDS episode, Johnny.
That is disrespectful.
How dare you? That was the AIDS of the AIDS episode at that
I'm
moment.
going to get on social media and issue an apology.
Yeah, dude. Dude, I mean, this type of show is what this show's about.
Yes.
This is dangerous.
This is dangerous, and it's like, it's important stuff.
Yeah, important. Yeah.
It is important because, I just want you guys to be able to have tools to make decisions for your body and health. And maybe this fits into it. And I'm sorry, guys, the science isn't settled. Scientists aren't gods. When medical malpractice is the second or third leading killer in the country. And that is not that they did something and it just didn't work. That's that they made the wrong decision and you died.
Yeah, like if they had not intervened, that person is still alive.
Yes.
That's what that is.
So that's what I'm done. So it's like, I just want to send this to Brian Callen and watch his head explode. Just watch his head.
You just won't. You can't.
You can't.
No, he won't.
It's
say
like,
she's a kook or something like.
Yeah.
Show me her published.
Where's her doctrine? She's a biological mathematician. I didn't even know that existed.
I didn't either.
And her husband is probably smarter than us three.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
He's a biological. He's a
He's a herbivore. Yeah.
He's a herbivore.
Stop,
Johnny. That's where you're supposed to jump in.
I don't remember.
Stop,
whatever they deal with, like plants, right? Like herbicides.
Yeah.
That's how they know it. That's how it shows how much smarter they are. And us, we can't even.
He's a plantitist.
He's
definitely not a carnivore. He's definitely not a carnivore.
He's got a real green thumb. That's what we'll say about that guy.
That's a dude.
Fucking plant nerd. That's what he is.
They're so smart. We can't even pronounce
Get their titles.
We had two people on today. So insanely smart.
Yeah.
They got to be like, she enjoyed it.
Yeah, much more than
the other guy's just like, okay, we've done this for an hour. Goodbye. Oh, I'm sorry. Slumming.
Great. That was great.
But yeah, dude, that was some deep shit.
You know what I like? That
What?
she didn't end up giving us an answer. She gave us an I don't know.
Yeah, I like that,
Instead of
dude.
just sticking with one thing or, hey, I know they want to
Gotta
hear
keep
this.
your hand in the swivel, dude.
Well, that to me is the
Johnny, whatever you're about to say, I'm going to boo right now.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. That to me is the first trait you can look for when you're trying to find someone that's shooting straight with you, is that they're willing to say, I don't know about important issues, rather than just giving you an answer because that's the accepted, the generally accepted thing.
I think, I go, I don't know, but if you're asking me, this is what I feel. But everything
doubt,
changes.
Though. You have some doubt.
Anything is possible, right?
Doubt is a sign of
anything is
intelligence.
possible. And the more data you get, the more your opinion should change, either one way or the other way. And she's talking about them excluding data from their findings. Like, you can't do that. And this is the big problem we're getting into with a lot of these debates that are happening on the internet, a lot just the social discussions, is when meanie facts or meanie data gets introduced to the conversation, they just shut down because they don't want to hear it, because being right is more important than doing right. And doing right is being open-minded to new data coming in. Like if she would have said, yeah, I've seen viruses in a microscope. I go, okay, now there's some more data. I'm open-minded to it. Okay. Great example. Lil season. First guy comes on. We're in the middle of the Lil season. I'm like, oh man, we're in the middle of Lil season. And then what was his name? Ed Mabry?
Ed Mabry, yeah, our friend.
Comes in and goes, all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And then you know we're in Lil season. I go, okay, now I'm leaning towards it's not the Lil season.
You got to integrate new knowledge. If you don't, you're just sticking your head.
You have to be open-minded. You can't, it's kind of like this thing with this Joe Rogan clip that went viral for me, predicting, and I know Johnny's made jokes about, is Sam talking more about him being right or the fact that he's
pretty funny though.
Okay, you're an asshole. But the point is that like the biggest criticism of that clip is that the riots didn't happen in 2024. And I would tell you that, like, you get into dangerous positions when you start laying down dates. I mean, how many times we've seen that with cult leaders? We're like, on May 17th, 2023, the aliens will go. And then, like, by May 21st, she's like, oh, dude, I am in deep shit right now.
We had someone on last week who told us that by what, today, right? We were.
Yeah, things are going to be, and I love Shepard.
He didn't say for sure, but
I love Shepard. Yeah. I never get in the dates because nothing goes according to plan.
Yeah, and I think you would have told him that then too. Yeah.
I just don't do dates, dude. And I said the election cycle and I was wrong, and I probably won't do that again.
That's not a date either, though. It's just a time frame. Like, hey, it's gonna
6.5 months later, which is fine. I mean, like. And I don't think that
you're not full psychic. No one said you're like full.
I've said that I'm psychic.
Full time? I thought you were part time. I thought you said there was a little in you.
Part time, but my brain is constantly churning out predictions.
It's a supercomputer. Right?
Yeah, I am a supercomputer that has some really broken programs.
You haven't updated your computer as a thing.
Yeah,
you need to update that
no, there's
computer.
no updates for this stuff. It's just this is the way the brain works, and it can't pronounce people's names, and it's functionally illiterate. That's how it goes. But it's a supercomputer of psychic predictions. That's how we go, bro. Bang, 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 dude. Yeah, it's like really. So I thought it was great. I'm open-minded to it. I find it very. She's really like nailed it when she talked about how all these, anti-COVID people can't be anti-AIDS. They just can't do it, and they can't get to that place because it was so ingrained into them. And then we saw all the deaths, and it's like, I can explain that to you. And it's like, and now she broke down the PCR test. That was incredible. It's like, imagine you're like, hey, dude, you go, hey, ma'am, my house is clean. And you're like, no, there's some dust. No, dude, I can't see any dust. We'll use this PCR test. And you come in, now your house is just full of mud because they magnified it 60,000 times.
You don't have a house anymore.
Yeah, actually. 100%. That's how crazy that was. I mean, dude, I am so right so often. It feels so good. Guys, if you go to samtripoli.com this weekend, I will be in Bohemian Grove. Bang. Then I'll be in San Diego. Then I'll be in Boston, Broadbrook, Kansas City, and more dates to come. Hopefully, we'll see. I don't know, man. I love going on the road, but if it doesn't happen, I'm okay with staying home too. I just like to chill. I really just, getting on a plane is becoming tougher and tougher. Go to samtripoli.com, guys, and check out all that stuff. Tell you about it. Guys, I'm telling you this. The premium content is pure fire on there. I'm trying to put up 3 a week. Sometimes I get 2, and then sometimes life gets really busy. But look at all those people in those thumbnails. Look at that.
That's a crackhead.
Yeah, dude, have you ever seen that guy? He was the ghetto priest that was on public access in LA. Oh, it's the funniest thing you will ever see in your life. So we're putting up those. Those are deep.
Who's this hot chick?
That is Vicky Morris, I believe is her name.
She dead.
She dead. She dead, dude. She was like, dude, it's just that whole thing about like, if you're a hot chick, you can jump social economics ladders easier than any other human being on the planet. And the problem with these chicks that do these sugar babies, these sidekicks, is that they never spend their money the way they should. She was getting $10,000 a month from her sugar daddy, and this was back in the 80s, so that meant something, $10,000 a month, right?
Which still means something.
No, it does. It does. Do you see the new thing that said there's no state in the country that you can live comfortably for $80,000? That is devastating.
It's crazy. But what's comfortable? That 80.
I don't know what.
That's what I mean. It starts to getting on what's considered comfortable.
It's probably you can like pay for everything without worrying too much.
Okay.
Your needs, I guess. I don't know. But that
listen, if you're broke and you want a house, move to Detroit. I mean, you can get a house for $1.
Dude, I send you these houses all the time that pop up that I'm just like, oh god.
I gotta get out of this town. I'm trying to figure it out. So
anywhere not here in New York, it's mostly fine, honestly. Like,
San Francisco. Well, San Francisco's expensive. You're like, why? You guys used to be great. Yeah. Now it's like I get to walk in a human poop.
No, it's people being tricked into moving there. Is what it is.
The only one Sam likes that's technically like that is San Diego. That's the only one that you said that you'll actually go to. That
if money wasn't a problem, I would move to San Diego, quit stand-up comedy, and just never leave the beach. I was watching the Dodgers versus Padres. And, dude, imagine playing baseball in San Diego. That's your job. I mean, is there any other better place? I mean, LA gets really hot. San Diego is always body temperature.
It can get warm there, too. But, yeah, you're right. It is that area around the stadium that's getting kind of weird.
You think so?
Well, yeah,
I've been there a few times.
The problem with San Diego is what happens everywhere where it's a great town, rich people move in, and then their kids destroy everything. Their kids are like, I have it too easy. I have to help other people. And then they just run that shit into the ground. It's just ridiculous. Keep going down. Keep going down. Johnny, now Cash Daddies, we love Howie Dewey. He's such a great guy. Absolutely insane human being.
Yes.
How's he been doing? I know I'm doing really good, dude. I'm doing really well. I'd say of all my investments over time, I would say I'm up 10%, which I think is good on an investment, right?
Yeah.
Nah.
Johnny's like, I do better. That's all I heard from that. Yeah. All I heard was like kind of weak.
Like if you invest $10,000 and you make $1,000, that's not good, Johnny.
Well, I mean, what time frame?
I've just been, me and Howie been killing it over the past let me see. Okay, on Uber, I'm up 23% on Uber which is my largest holding over the past year or two.
That's great.
Yeah. What do we got? We're up on Intel. I got a big chunk of Intel, 18% on Intel. So yeah.
And for anybody who doesn't know,
if you follow Howie, you can do better. 21% on Nvidia. I'm up.
Here's the thing for someone.
No, I think I'm up. I think I'm up even more.
My gold investment's up 58%.
But do you guys have like an intro video on like where to invest? Where is that like as a real beginner?
There's stuff in here.
Yeah, it's called Cash Daddy's Podcast. That's
and there's
crushing.
There's a Discord and a chat that is just popping all the time, where people are sharing ideas with each other and with Howie and getting
Johnny,
feedback.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you for your ideas.
My homie invested in detention centers, killing it.
Oh, really?
Detention centers?
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I was like, and he said
like prisons?
For the ice holding.
Oh my God, a Mexican investor.
And he sent it to me, and I was like, oh, real fucking asshole.
They come pick him up, and he's like, I own this place.
I own.
That's what everyone wants to do with Pelletier. Buy enough that you tell them to leave you alone.
That's great. That's so funny.
So Cash Daddies, go to Patreon, patreon.com/Cash Daddies. Chaos Twins is coming out. I'm so excited. Issue number 2. Very excited. Got put that on the wall. We got to put that on the wall. Yeah. And then listen, our affiliates are some of the nicest human beings on planet Earth, and they are trying to help you. like the Live Longer formula. He's crushing it. Okay. If you want to get your body right, you got to find, like, I'm super tired. I have to figure, I'm tired all the time to the point everyone's telling me I need to get on TRT because I'm always tired.
You should go check your blood.
I really don't think you're sleeping. You're supposed to get at least 8 hours, dude.
No, I mean, I get decent.
Johnny,
I don't get 8 hours.
Johnny, you've never been on the road with him. He's got sleep apnea. He doesn't get it. He doesn't get REM sleep. His own snoring wakes him up.
You're also not getting enough hours. Like, I know you're not.
Rife Technology. Someone just bought it. Thank you guys very much. It's
Someone
really
bought the company?
No, someone just bought one of the machines.
Okay.
Buy gold and silver every day, all day. Mineral King. If you want to get rid of those parasites, want to make your soil better. AquaCure, hydrogen brown gas. You need that hydrogen, dude. Go up. Harley Ray, dude. We're going to work with them either on this podcast or one of my other podcasts. Going to get that going. Candles, crystals, sage. Chemical Free Body. Took it in between the shows. Love that. And then, dude, I got to get shredded, dude. I just got to get shredded. I went to get stretched. This kid did acupuncture on my hip, and it felt better for a day. He was just, and it was like, and I
stuck those needles in there?
No, he put his finger right there. Acupressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Acupressure, and he put it in there, and it felt good for a day.
Really?
Like a full 24 hours?
Yeah. It was crazy, dude. Huh. So get in shape. EMF rocks. I got to call him up, dude. I got to get that shit going. EMF rocks. I'm going to start validating, putting my phones in bags. Prometheus, the website. I'm telling you, if you have a podcast and you're doing well and you're putting out premium content and you're worried about them taking it from you at some point because you say something they don't like, put it on your own website. Even if you're putting it on Substack, Locals, Twitter, right? Even if you're doing that, put it on your own website too, because you never know when those things change. Your website stays the same. That's why you got to go to Prometheus, Brain Supreme. I mean, dude, this guy's crushing it. My favorite moment is watching the guest listen to Xavier's question. It's the best.
You guys can't see, but the second I start talking, you can just see Sam. What are you gonna freaking say right now?
We got a wide shot now. We got a 2-shot where we can get both of you guys.
We just stare at you, going, "What are you gonna say?" Nuked social, all my social media there. Tinfoil hat, only conspiracies. Join the Zero. I gotta bring back Zero, but I have so many podcasts. Eddie Bravo wants to do a football podcast with me.
What?
He's like, let's just talk football. I'm like, okay.
We have a sports podcast that you don't do.
You should just
not me, dude. Not me. Okay. All those. I gotta get doom scrolling up there. That's been crushing. Doom scrolling.
He can replace Ari on Punch Drunk. Why don't you just have him replace Ari?
Because he only likes football. Doom scrolling's every Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Be our football
and it has been fire. Did you show up last time? I thought you were there for a second.
I'm always on Doom. I mean, it's honestly really entertaining. I know
it is an entertaining show, right?
It's one where you can just I'll be editing or whatever, and then you're just the wheel of doom.
The wheel of doom.
You don't know what's coming,
and we don't know what's coming.
Seriously, say sometimes Sam's mind blown, and sometimes Sam's like, all right, next one.
Because they're always like, why don't you just put the video? I go, because that's the fun. And then people freak out because they don't know how the scoring goes.
I don't know how it does either.
What do you mean scoring? What is that?
Midnight Mike just is like, we're going to have a scoring system based on these videos.
What is getting scored, though?
I thought you knew.
I'm not, dude, we can't tell you. It's the secret sauce.
No, but is the video being scored? Like
every time
the Wheel of Doom scores
so
the
there's like 100 videos, and every time a video plays, I don't know how it gets ranked, but they give them a certain amount of points for that video, and for some reason it always breaks the record.
Who gets points?
We don't know. That's the point. Watch the show.
Stop asking questions. Okay, it's not important.
Doom scrolling Tuesdays live.
Tuesday on almost everything. Also, if you ever want to catch our live shows, we got live. We might be doing live BS coming up. We do live Cash Daddies, live Doom scrolling. Those are now going to be available on both Facebook and Kick.
Oh, I just thought of. what we should call the tier where you pay $1,000. We should call it Smash Daddies. Oh.
Smash Daddies. Change it to Smash Daddies.
Someone's gonna want to smash one of you guys.
$1,000 tier is now called Smash Daddies.
Yeah,
there we go.
Smash you guys.
So we might have to start doing some live TFHs. Should we call it Hate Watch?
So we have to call something that, because that's the funniest thing we ever said. A couple of people were like, "You should really just change BS to Hate Watch."
Do you want to change it to BS to Hate Watch?
I gotta check to make sure somebody doesn't have that already.
And someone will click it. Someone will click it. Oh,
can we call it BS, aka Hate Watch?
It's too long. Because we don't get the keywords and people, it gets cut off if we do it.
I don't know. I like BS.
When's the last time someone changed their podcast name mid?
I mean, Luis J. Gomez did that with Real Ass Podcast. Then it was Lewis and Zach, and then he quit the show.
What's going on? Speaking of shows being torn asunder, Tower Gang, right? What it was?
Yeah,
what
they had a fight
doing?
over a venue situation.
And then they're just, I saw it on Twitter, but I
thought they made up,
they
but
did?
I guess
Okay.
I don't
They're
know if
not
they
doing
did.
the show. Okay.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like yesterday, what's his name was saying that they weren't.
Dude,
They were
they're
gone.
wild animals, dude.
They really are.
They're literally named after wild animals. Raven and Top Lobster. So it's like.
I love those guys. Though.
No, I think they're a great show. I think they're super important.
I
They're
desperately
fearless.
want to stay on their good side, so I don't. I'd never want to be on the end of that Twitter wrath.
Yeah, I love them. I think they're great. I think it sucks that broke them up, and I hope they have a super successful festival.
They should all make out and get back together.
Yeah, the radio. I gotta talk to them. Why aren't my other two specials down there? Let me talk to them. But all my there they are.
There.
All my specials are there. 6 specials for fun. I'm no Ali Sadiq, but
Yeah, that dude, man, he cranks them out, doesn't he?
dude, he was the best, dude. He's the best. Anything else? Oh yeah, go to the YouTube, guys.
Oh yeah,
YouTube. I gotta get a link to that.
Apparently, somebody else is posting them too. Because I saw comments. I was like, "Are you guys also this account?"
I don't care. Everyone can post them. Post them everywhere you want.
I mean,
we're the real account. We gotta let them know.
Just tell us that you're posting them so we can.
And don't cut out the fucking ads. And you can post anywhere you want.
I mean, that's how Andrew Tate and those big people. They're paying people to
Post it,
post.
dude.
They're like,
you want to post it? You want to make it your own channel? Post the
You can
videos.
make money off
Just
of it.
don't take out the ads, and I don't care.
They're paying people to post.
Technically, if
So
you get a following,
what Andrew Tate did was he had this this membership he wanted you to join, like join his secret
Top
membership.
G membership.
Yeah, Top G. And every person you got to sign up, he gave you $50.
So, okay, it's kind of like a multi-level marketing kind of thing, or something like that.
Yeah,
we should do something.
And
like
he'd
that.
make you. He would make them make reels.
Them
of his content. Be
he's
like,
good at making people do stuff.
I'll give you money, but if you make content for me. So he has how many people posting content of his? So eventually,
it's everywhere.
Yeah, eventually, even though his channel's blocked, everybody's posting
Listen,
it. So
if you want to put tinfoil hat on YouTube or wherever, we don't care. Have fun. You just can't cut out the ads and just put it wherever you want. And if you make money off it, I don't care. I really don't care. Just, I need the views.
XG will send you some Oakleys.
Yeah, don't forget, guys. Yeah, #1 podcast, and the #1 podcast actually marks the spot. We're giving away
The world's
Oakley's.
#1 podcast.
#1 podcast already.
#1
Yeah,
podcast.
I beat Sam.
Look at that,
Right
dude.
there, guys. Check it out.
This guy's great.
Look at that. You want to go snowboarding? You want to go deep sea fishing? It's all there.
Xavier, you're doing great, buddy. I'm really proud of you. You're doing great.
Yes,
I mean,
thank
dead
you.
serious. You're doing
Me
great.
too.
You're just seeing what sticks, and something's going to hit, and it's going to be great.
Exactly.
I'm telling you, dude, you should do a Spanish podcast.
It's just, you know what the thing is, and I've told you, the real Spanish speakers look at me like an idiot. Because
Well,
my
I mean,
Spanish, they already look at me in
English
English. I know. I was
speakers
about.
look at you
I
like
knew you
an
were
idiot.
about to say that. I just want to look like a double idiot in all of the world.
Idiot.
Yeah,
That should be the name of your new
double idiot. Doble pendejo.
Okay, so yeah, there we go. Anything else to push your new podcast?
Just go check it out. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment for this cool new studio we got.
I like it. Hopefully my gut won't be that bad. I'm gonna lose weight just to.
It's good.
And Johnny, anything you want to push?
Yeah, find me on. I lost a lot of followers on Twitter while I was banned for
Some
just spitting
bullshit.
the truth. So
That's some bullshit.
At Johnny Woodard on Twitter, come find me.
All right, guys, enjoy these highlights.
Homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Tinfoil hat.